Chapter 29:15. Do you want to admit defeat? 1. Looking at Lung Ruoxue with hidden bitterness, Uncle Long revealed an aggrieved expression. Lung Ruoxue looked on and could not help but burst out laughing. Uncle, you can place a bet on me, right? After Lung Ruoxue's reminder, Uncle Long suddenly came to his senses. Why was he so silly? Although it was a pity that he could not bet on himself, he could bet on Xue. However, they still felt that they had lost quite a bit of money. However, it was better than nothing. Uncle Long's self-comforting words made him feel a little better. Then he pointed at Lung Ruoxue and told the staff, I want to place a bet on my niece. To outsiders, the four of them had always referred to Lung Ruoxue as their niece. Now, this niece of his was called Apple. When he thought of the name that Xue had given him, Uncle Long felt a little confused. The name evildoer was still evildoer. However, with his current face, Uncle Long really didn't know what to say. Sure. How much do you want to bet? The staff member asked with a smile. I want to bet 1 billion top-grade crystals. Uncle Long said without thinking. How much? The staff member thought he had heard wrong and could not help but ask again. 1 billion top-grade crystals. Don't you understand? Uncle Long said loudly with an inscrutable and arrogant expression. Do you have that much money? After the staff member confirmed it, he asked with a trembling heart. Can't you guys do it on credit? If I win, you can deduct 1 billion from my capital. If I lose, you can deduct it from my reward for fighting in the ring. Uncle Long said with a calm face. Anyway, he was planning to get something for nothing. He had no money. The staff member almost passed out when he heard Uncle Long's matter-of-fact words. How could this person be so thick-skinned? Although they could buy on credit, no one would buy so much at once. If he really lost, how long would it take? As for whether the other party would win or not, the staff member did not even think about it. He was just a small deity. He was afraid that he would be killed before he could even get out of the ring. Therefore, he did not have to worry about any losses on his side. What the hell is this? Just tell me if it's okay or not. Uncle Long lost his patience when he saw the staff member's cowardice. I can't make that decision, but I want to remind you that if you lose the bet, it will take a long time to return the money. Perhaps for a lifetime. The staff added in his heart. However, he did not dare to say it out loud when he saw Uncle Long's unfriendly expression. What? Are you afraid I'll go back on my word? Uncle Long smiled when he heard the staff. No, I just wanted to remind you. The staff member said carefully. Thank you. But I know what I'm doing, so you don't have to worry about me. Money. It's just a worldly possession. If I really lose, what's wrong with a lifetime? I'm not a short-lived person. Uncle Long said with confidence. After the staff member heard this, he couldn't help but think, if money is really a mere worldly possession, why did you place so much bet? Ever since the city of abandoned ruins had wagers, no one had ever dared to bet so much, even if it was on credit. Since you've already decided, please wait a moment. I'll go get the head butler. The staff member said to Uncle Long after complaining to himself. After a while, a short and fat middle-aged man came over with the staff. The middle-aged man sized up Uncle Long and asked calmly, You're the one who's going to bet 1 billion? Yes, I am. Uncle Long nodded with a smile. As long as he thought of the jinxure that was about to fly into his pocket, he would feel happy. Do you understand the risks involved? The middle-aged man asked. What, you guys will go back on your word? Uncle Long's face paled with shock. Thanks. When the middle-aged man heard this, he choked. I'm afraid you'll go back on your word or be beaten to death, okay? Of course we won't go back on our word. After taking a few deep breaths, the middle-aged man decided not to stoop to the level of the idiot in front of him. That's good. I don't have anything to worry about. Uncle Long said, relieved. These words made the middle-aged man depressed again. The middle-aged man realized that the man in front of him seemed to have a different way of thinking. Otherwise, why couldn't she understand what he was trying to say? But looking at the other party's expression, it didn't seem like he did it on purpose. As such, the middle-aged man was a little conflicted. After staring at Uncle Long for a long time, the middle-aged man wanted to tell Uncle Long the rules of the competition again. Uncle Long indicated that he had remembered them and urged, "Can I place my bet now? Don't waste my time, I'm in a hurry to make money." The middle-aged man expressed that he had never seen someone so eager to die. However, he had also heard of the other party's strength, and this kind of person was exactly what they needed the most. "You can place your bet now." The middle-aged man looked at the strength of the contestant called Apple and nodded. "If only you were like this earlier, you still said so much nonsense." Uncle Long glanced at the middle-aged man and said with a little dissatisfaction. When the middle-aged man heard that, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood again. He could not help but curse in his heart. What kind of person was this? It was bad enough that she didn't put him, the head butler, in her eyes at all, but now she even complained that he was talking nonsense? If it wasn't for the fact that the other party was about to fight and might lose his life, he would have made sure to teach this guy a lesson. However, even though he was angry, the middle-aged man still personally handled the betting procedures for Uncle Long. In order to be formal, the contract between the two parties was also a formal contract recognized by the contract rules. Once one party broke the contract, they would be severely punished by the contract rules. Seeing this contract, Uncle Long smiled in his heart. After settling Uncle Long's betting procedures, the head butler didn't want to see him anymore and immediately turned to leave. After settling Uncle Long, the staff continued to receive the rest of them. "I also want to bet 1 billion top-grade crystals on credit," Ice Spirit said directly when she saw the staff looking at them. "Fuck. Another billion?" He still had to ask the head butler to come forward. The poor staff member said goodbye to Ice Spirit with a bitter face and went to get the butler. The head butler, who had just left, almost went crazy when he saw that someone was looking for him again. "Are you done?" However, since someone was willing to work for them for free, the head butler felt that there was no reason for him to refuse, so he continued to personally handle the betting matters for Ice Spirit. After completing the procedures for the Ice Spirit, the butler walked away angrily. Then, the staff carefully turned to look at Dongfangyu. Seeing this, Dongfangyu smiled and said, "Give me 1 billion top-grade crystals too." "Your sister." It was still 1 billion. This time, the staff members were going crazy. When the chief butler heard this news, his face turned green with anger. Chapter 29:16. Do you want to admit defeat? 2. He deeply felt that he had been played. Otherwise, why would he suddenly get 1 billion? "Can't you let me catch my breath?" Was he trying to tire him to death? However, he was a bastard who didn't want to earn money. Therefore, even though he was very angry, the head butler still ran over to help Dongfangyu with the procedures. After dealing with Dongfangyu, only Lung Ruoxue, the demon, Mingji, and the burly man had not placed their bets. The middle-aged man looked at the four of them and asked, "Do you guys want to bet 1 billion too?" "I haven't decided yet." Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly. "Me too," the demon also said. "I also need to consider." Minga replied, playing along. "Have to consider it even more." The burly man looked at the middle-aged man and said with a smile, "Take your time to think about it." Gritting his teeth, the middle-aged man turned around and left in a huff. After the middle-aged man left, the burly man looked worriedly at the people in front of him and sighed, "So much money, how long will it take you guys to return it? At most, you'll spend a lifetime. Besides, why do you think we can lose?" Uncle Long said unhappily, "Brother, the entire arena is controlled by the city lord's mansion. Do you think they'll let you win after betting so much?" Avoiding the staff, the burly man whispered in his ear, "The contract has already been signed. Do they dare to renege on their debt?" Uncle Long blinked his eyes and asked in confusion, "They won't dare to renege on their debt, but they can make it so that your niece can't leave the arena." The burly man looked at Lung Ruoxue, who had a blank expression on her face, and was extremely worried. Although he didn't think of himself as a good person, he had always wanted to be on good terms with Uncle Long and the others. In their short interaction, he had even regarded them as his confidants. Now, his niece wanted to fight in the ring, but it wouldn't be an easy fight. However, the other party clearly didn't realize the danger. He didn't even know what to say. Moreover, he couldn't make his words too clear. Otherwise, The people of the city lord's mansion wouldn't let him off. Calm down. I have confidence in my niece. Do you want to bet too? Uncle Long patted the burly man's shoulder and asked. They'll play a bit too. The burly man said, giving him face. Come, go and call your chief steward. He also needs to pay 1 billion top-grade crystal stones. Uncle Long pointed at the burly man and said to the staff with a smirk. In an instant, the burly man felt his legs go soft. So, brother, don't be like this. He didn't plan to bet 1 billion. In fact, he could only place a 10 yuan bet at most. However, when he saw Uncle Long's serious expression, he didn't dare to refuse. The staff member turned around gloomily. After a while, the butler ran over again, panting. As soon as he saw them, a middle-aged man shouted angrily, "Can you guys stop tormenting people like this? Can't you place all your bets at once?" Head butler, of course we have to think carefully about such a large amount. How can we decide so quickly? In fact, we don't feel good about tormenting you like this. Why don't you just wait here and help us with the procedures immediately after we've decided? This way, you won't have to break your legs from running, right? Uncle Long looked at the middle-aged man, who was stomping his feet in anger, and said, "My suggestion is good." Thanks, the middle-aged man was so angry at Uncle Long's sophistry that he almost fainted. He couldn't deny that what Uncle Long said made sense, but as the chief steward of the city lord's mansion, how could he wait for them to make a decision like an ordinary staff member? That would be too damaging to his dignity. Therefore, he still couldn't agree to such a thing. The middle-aged man was filled with anger. After he finished the procedures for the burly man, he glared at him and then left. "Ooh, the head butler is glaring at me." After the other party left, the burly man said with a sad face, "What are you afraid of? It's not like you'll lose a piece of meat if you stare. You have to be like a man, you have to stand up, do you understand?" Uncle Long patted the burly man's shoulder with such force that he almost vomited blood. At this time, Minga said with a faint smile, "I've already decided. I'm going to place a bet." The staff members had been provoked in a short period of time. He could tell that these people were definitely doing this on purpose. He was deliberately tormenting him and the head butler. But he couldn't ignore the customer's request. So, without even asking Ming Ji how much money he wanted to bet, he went to find the butler. "Are you guys done?" This time, the head butler also flew into a rage and roared. "What's wrong? Can I bet?" Minga blinked her eyes innocently and said in a wronged tone, "Yes. Hurry up and get off." The head butler almost bit his teeth into pieces as he urged, 1 billion, you know what I mean." Minga laughed in a very lecherous manner. He understood. How could he not understand? After angrily settling the procedures for Ming Ji, the head butler was no longer in a hurry to leave. He glared at Leng Ruoxue and the demon. "They'll give you 5 minutes. Hurry up and place your bets." Knowing that this was the old man's limit, Leng Ruoxue and the demon looked at each other with evil smiles. Then Leng Ruoxue helplessly said, "Since you're in such a hurry, then place your bets on us. Just like them, each of you will get 1 billion top-grade crystals." The head butler nodded and quickly went through the procedures before turning around and leaving with a relieved expression. The staff member heaved a sigh of relief. However, at this moment, Uncle Long waved at the staff member and said with a smile, "You can bet on multiple people, right?" "Yes, I am." The staff member looked at the other party with a vigilant look and nodded. "Then he'll bet another 1 billion on my niece-in-law," Uncle Long said calmly. He was calm, but the staff could not. Fortunately, Ice Spirit and the others didn't continue to play with each other this time. They expressed that they would do the same. The staff member had no choice but to bite the bullet and go to the head butler for the nth time. After the chief butler arrived, he was unable to vent his anger on Uncle Long and the others. After settling the procedures for the other party with a depressed look, the head butler said ruthlessly, "This is the last time, you're not allowed to place any more bets." "Well, I'm not betting anymore. May I know how long the betting period is?" Uncle Long nodded understandingly before asking. In other words, he was asking how long it would take for them to get the money. The betting period is 1 month. Of course, you can also choose to transfer the bet automatically. This way, there will be no time limit, and you can withdraw the money you won at any time after a month. The head butler explained. This is a good idea. Let's transfer the money automatically. Uncle Long nodded, and everyone else agreed. In fact, the head butler naturally hoped that they would do the same. This way, these people would naturally suffer. He would definitely get his retribution for tormenting him again and again. Chapter 29:17. Do you want to admit defeat? 3. After finally settling things with Uncle Long and the others, the head butler left with an expression that said he didn't want to see them ever again. Apple, let's go to the arena and take a look. Seeing that there was nothing much to do, Uncle Long decided to take everyone to the arena. Yes. Lung Ruoxue nodded her head and obediently followed behind Uncle Long with the demon. Since their arena would only officially begin tomorrow, they could only be spectators today. The place they went to was the private room of the force the burly man belonged to. After entering the private room, Lung Ruoxue watched the competition in high spirits, while the burly man looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle with a face full of worry. $1 billion. A debt of 1 billion top-grade crystals, how long would it take to pay it back? It looked like he would have to live frugally in the future, or else he would have to live on air. He glanced at Uncle Long with hidden bitterness. He didn't dare to complain at all and could only worry in his heart. He then turned his gaze to Lung Ruoxue. He could not understand how this woman called Apple could be so calm. Didn't she know that the people who died in the arena today could be her fate in the future? Of course, Lung Ruoxue didn't know that the burly man was cursing her out of worry. Furthermore, after a few matches, she had more or less understood the rules of the arena. In fact, it wasn't necessary to kill someone in the ring, but the premise was that the other party had to admit defeat before the battle. Otherwise, it would be a fight to the death. From this, it could be seen that the purpose of this was to give everyone the chance to choose their opponent. However, Lung Ruoxue did not think that the city lord of the city of abandoned ruins would be so kind. And after a few matches, she didn't find anyone taking the initiative to admit defeat. After asking the burly man, Lung Ruoxue, she found out that the city lord's estate had given them a generous reward. That was why the challengers were unwilling to admit defeat and held onto a trace of hope. This was a typical case of someone who valued money over their lives. After knowing that they could still admit defeat in the ring, Uncle Long and the other three couldn't help but feel a little regretful. They also blamed themselves for not understanding the rules clearly in advance. In addition, the burly man had deliberately misled them, causing them to think that no one could survive in the ring. That was why they didn't dare to participate. After all, they didn't want to kill each other. Later, when Schwer came, they didn't feel that the rules of the arena were so cruel anymore. Anyway, with Schwer around, she would definitely not let anything happen to them. Now, since they could admit defeat, they were even less afraid of the other party's underhanded means. Hee. With Schwer around, it would not be easy for the other party to plot against them. The next day, Lung Ruoxue and the rest finally had a chance to go on stage. The opponents for the first round would be decided by drawing lots, and they would go on stage in order. Lung Ruoxue's first opponent was actually a god king. It was said that this god king was quite powerful and had vicious methods. In the many matches that had already taken place, she had yet to lose. As a result, when she drew this person, even the staff in charge of the stage felt some sympathy for her. Ignoring her opponent's sympathetic gaze, Lung Ruoxue calmly waited for her turn. Schwer, my opponent is a divine emperor. At this moment, the demon walked over and said, Really? Did the staff sympathize with you? Lung Ruoxue laughed and teased. No, I didn't tee. The demon said calmly. But I've heard that there are very few women in the arena, so you're definitely a rare animal. The demon continued. It seems so. However, I'll let all the men here know that women are not to be trifled with. Lung Ruoxue was full of confidence. I support you. But what if we become opponents? If one side admits defeat, we won't be able to get any money. The demon whispered worriedly. Don't worry, we want meat. Lung Ruoxue guaranteed. If it wasn't for this, she wouldn't have encouraged Uncle Long and the others to come and fight. Most importantly, she didn't just want to earn money by fighting in the arena. Other than that, she had another purpose. Of course, she didn't tell the demon and the others about this for the time being. That's good. Let's do our best. The demon laughed. Yes, demon. It's my turn. Wait for my good news. Lung Ruoxue gave the evildoer a hug and walked up the tall stage with elegant steps. A tall man was already waiting in the ring. When the man saw Lung Ruoxue, he first gave her a disdainful look, then used an arrogant expression to say, "Why is a woman out here fighting instead of staying at home and giving birth? Why don't men stay at home and give birth? Why are they out here fighting?" Lung Ruoxue couldn't help but ask curiously, "Damn it, what did you say?" The tall man roared. Along with his roar, many people in the audience also jeered, "Let's teach this woman a lesson. Let's teach her a lesson." Turning around to look at the jeering crowd, Lung Ruoxue smiled calmly. "I said, you should stay at home and give birth, not come out to fight. Do you understand now? Woman, you're really looking for death." When the tall man heard this, his anger surged up. He glared at Lung Ruoxue with his eyes that were spitting fire as if he was looking at a dead person. However, Lung Ruoxue did not care about the other party's fierce gaze. She only said indifferently, "Don't worry about whether I'm looking for death or not. I'm asking you, you're going to admit defeat. Admit defeat, your sister." The word admit defeat was an absolute humiliation to the tall man. Especially when this humiliation was given to him by a woman. How could he accept this? Thanks, therefore, in the next moment he didn't care if the other party was a woman or not and directly attacked. A swift and fierce attack was directed towards Lung Ruoxue's head. However, Lung Ruoxue calmly dodged the attack with a leap. As she dodged the attack, she kicked out. With a bang, the tall man was sent flying by her kick. He smashed onto the stage's railing, then slid to the ground and fainted. This scene instantly silenced the entire audience. Many of the audience members still maintained their previous postures, their mouths half open, and some even forgot to put down their arms. Shocking. It was absolutely shocking. After a long while, the audience finally came back to their senses and reacted to what they had just seen. Is this fake? It was not scientific. How could this be? Such a tall and big god king was actually sent flying by a puny god. How was this possible? Faced with the audience's disbelief, Lung Ruoxue was unbelievably calm. She glanced at the judge, who was also petrified, and asked, "Judge, what do you think?" The judge, who had regained his senses, listened to Lung Ruoxue's question in a daze. He did not know how to react. "Judge." Seeing that the other party was not replying, Lung Ruoxue could only continue asking. The match continues. After thinking for a while, the judge said, he couldn't be blamed for not reacting in time. It was just that this was the first time such a thing had happened in the ring, so he was somewhat at a loss. He's already unconscious, how can we continue? Or did the judges support my unfair victory? Lung Ruoxue asked indifferently. As soon as she said this, the audience had a good impression of her. They didn't know who started it, but they shouted, "I can't win without honor. The apple is mighty." The familiar voice made Lung Ruoxue's face darken. At the same time, the evildoer who had not gone on stage yet and had gone to the private room to watch the competition glanced at the burly man who was unwilling to be left out and joined in the jeering. Instantly, the burly man was so scared that he obediently shut his mouth. Why are these people so imposing? Even a deity's gaze made him tremble in fear. Although this fact made him lose a lot of face, he was really afraid. Judge, should we respect the opinions of the audience? At this moment, Lung Ruoxue, who was on the stage, suggested to the judge, who was obviously not in his best condition. The judge had been at a loss. This was the first time something like this had happened. Lung Ruoxue saw that the judge couldn't make up her mind at the moment and helplessly took out a chair from her bracelet. Then, she laid down on it under the watchful eyes of the crowd. It can even be done like this? The audience was once again stunned and their worldview was completely refreshed. However, it was clear that this was not Lung Ruoxue's first time doing this. Hence, her entire set of movements was rather smooth and natural. The judge was even more dumbfounded. Wasn't he in the arena? Why did he lie down? Our match hasn't even officially started and he's already fainted. I'm really disappointed. Lung Ruoshua looked at the judge and seemed to be very dissatisfied. Then she took out a big red apple and ate it indifferently. For a moment, everyone in the audience, including the judge, had the illusion that the other party was not here to fight, but to watch the match. Look at how he's living his life. He's more carefree than the audience. Apple, apple. Seeing that the situation was not good, the judge stuttered. What? You want to eat too? Raising the apple in her hand, Lung Ruoshua looked at the other party with a face full of vigilance. It was as if the other party could snatch it away at any moment. The judge was helpless and sighed. They're still in the middle of a competition. Can't you be more mindful of your image? The referee truly felt that if everyone in the competition was like the apple in front of him, the referee would be furious. I know, but my opponent has fainted. Lung Ruoshua said innocently. How about I change your opponent? Even though the judge wanted Lung Ruoshua to take advantage of her, she was obviously unwilling. As a fair judge, he naturally couldn't instigate Lung Ruoshua to do so in public. Otherwise, if she incurred the wrath of the public, he would have to bear the consequences. Then what about him? Lung Ruoshua pointed at the tall man who had fainted and asked, "Wait for him to wake up before you guys fight." The judge said through gritted teeth, "All right then. You have to be quick, your sister's time is precious." Lung Ruoshua said with a smile. The judge suppressed his anger and ordered his men to carry away the unconscious tall man. He then immediately changed Lung Ruokshu's opponent. Upon seeing her new opponent, Lung Ruokshu's first words were, "Do you want to admit defeat?" Chapter 29:18. The domineering Lung Ruoshua. 1. Lung Ruokshu's second opponent was also a burly man with a burly figure and a fiery temper. He was also a god king. Originally, he didn't want to fight with a woman. Now that he came up, this reckless woman in front of him said this, he was really angry. So, without thinking, he shouted, "Woman, I should be the one saying that." "Oh really? You should know that the previous one, who had a similar build to you, had already been kicked unconscious by me. Could it be that you want to enjoy the same treatment as him?" Lung Ruoshua smiled and said calmly. However, when a certain man heard this, he became even more furious. What did the other party mean by this? Curse him? Lung Ruoshua felt aggrieved when she saw the other party glaring at her with hatred. She immediately said, "I'm doing this for your own good. I don't need it. Come on. Stop wasting time." The burly man shouted impatiently, then instantly attacked again. Lung Ruoshua blinked her eyes helplessly. Suddenly, a whip appeared in her hand. Although she didn't like this kind of weapon, it seemed to be quite useful in the arena. After her opponent's attack, Lung Ruoshua swung her whip and instantly dispersed her opponent's attack. Such a change caused the intrepid man to be petrified. How could this be possible? A certain man looked at Lung Ruoshua in a daze. He really couldn't figure out how this little deity in front of him had done it. Could it be that the whip was a high-grade divine artifact? With this thought in mind, the man's eyes glowed with greed. He looked at Lung Ruoshua as if she was his prey. According to the rules of the competition, if they defeated their opponent, then the opponent's spoils of war would all belong to them. Hence, at this moment, Lung Ruoshua had become a gold mine in his eyes. His gaze towards Lung Ruoshua had become much more fervent. When Lung Ruoshua saw this, she knew that this man had the intention to kill her. However, she did not want to continue teasing her opponent. Hence, she lashed out at the intrepid man with her whip. As for the man, he could only keep dodging and did not have the chance to attack Lung Ruoshua. The whips were thrown out, and none of them missed. They all hit the man's body, making him so angry that his whole body trembled and he almost vomited blood and died. What made him even more crazy was that the whips seemed to have eyes. No matter where he dodged, the whips would follow him. But what about himself? He was getting more and more embarrassed. Blood continued to ooze out of the wounds on his body and dripped onto the ground of the arena. After that, the blood flowed down through the small cracks in the arena. Seeing this, Lung Ruoshua narrowed her eyes and whipped even harder. As for the audience, They had no idea how to react to the scene before them. It wasn't a one-sided match, but the man didn't have a chance to attack. He could only dodge awkwardly. As for the woman, she strolled around leisurely and at ease. Seeing how relaxed she was, the people present couldn't help but be envious of her. It was unknown how long had passed, but Lung Ruoxue and her opponent remained in this stalemate. She didn't want to kill him, but she didn't give the man a chance to attack either. When she got tired from swinging the whip, she would even sit on the lounge chair and continue swinging it. Seeing her like this, the audience was speechless. The opponent was so excited that he almost went crazy. However, no matter how furious his opponent was, he didn't have a chance to attack. The referee didn't know what to do in such a state. After thinking for a long time, the judge finally said, "Apple." "Thanks. What, you want to eat again?" Upon hearing this, Lung Ruoxue took out another red apple and held it in her hand as she looked at the judge. However, the whip in her hand did not slow down at all and was still working hard. Hearing this, the judge's mouth twitched and he said helplessly, "Miss Apple, can you be serious? We're in the middle of a competition, how can you just sit there? The judge means that I should be lying down? Also, you'd better tell me clearly, how am I not serious? If you don't explain it clearly, I'm not done with you." After Lung Ruoxue said those harsh words, she lashed the whip in her hand at the judge. The judge was so frightened that his face turned pale and he forgot to react. The whip landed on his body. The judge was in pain, and he couldn't help but curse in his heart. This crazy woman. The audience was shocked. They thought to themselves, this woman is really bold. She even dares to hit the judge. Lung Ruoxue's opponent, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. When he saw that the judge had also taken a whip, for some reason, he suddenly felt balanced in his heart. He even came to an important conclusion: the woman in front of him was definitely someone who treated everyone equally. Naturally, Lung Ruoxue was not clear about her opponent's evaluation. After she had lashed the judge once, she seemed to have changed her target and lashed out a few more times. "Apple, he's your opponent. Why are you hitting me?" The judge shouted angrily. "I'm hitting you," Lung Ruoxue thought to herself. However, she put on an innocent look and said, "You said I'm frivolous. This has seriously affected my reputation. So, you must be punished. I'm the judge, you can't hit me." The judge was so angry that his heart was twitching, and he continued to shout at the top of his voice. He should be taught a lesson for doing something wrong. Who cares who he is? Lung Ruoxue said nonchalantly, her hands not stopping in the slightest. As for Lung Ruoxue's opponent, seeing how she was neither servile nor overbearing, treating the judge's threat like dirt, he simply wanted to give her a thumbs up. What a brave woman. One should know that she was the only one on the stage who dared to publicly whip the adjudicator. Even though the others would have the same thoughts at times, they would not dare to do so. Thus, Lung Ruoxue had become the idol of her opponents. Can I admit defeat now?" the man suddenly said. However, it was as if Lung Ruoxue didn't hear her opponent's words. The whip in her hand continued to lash at the judge's body, causing him to scream nonstop. After a short while, the judge and Lung Ruoxue's opponent were in the same sorry state. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue finally stopped and looked at the judge innocently. "My opponent has admitted defeat again." Now, the pitiful judge had just uttered 2 words when he swallowed the words "cannot admit defeat" under the threat of Lung Ruoxue's indifferent gaze. He believed that as long as he finished speaking, this woman's whip would definitely land on his body again. He was obviously quite frightened and did not dare to resist Lung Ruoxue's powerful aura. This reality made him rather depressed. In the arena, he was absolutely worthy of his position and was respected by many contestants. However, in front of this apple, his treatment fell to the bottom, which made him quite uncomfortable. "What's wrong?" Lung Ruoxue raised the whip in her hand with a faint smile as she asked indifferently. "You can admit defeat." Under Lung Ruoxue's intense gaze, the judge unwillingly uttered these 2 words. "You can leave now." Lung Ruoxue nodded her head in satisfaction as she spoke to her opponent. The opponent nodded and walked down the ring with a hint of depression. Today's incident was definitely the first time in his life, and he might not encounter it again in the future. Chapter 29:19. The domineering Lung Ruoxue, 2. I'll find you another opponent. After Lung Ruoxue's opponent left, the judge said this with a face full of fear. Then, without waiting for Lung Ruoxue to nod her head in agreement, he had already slipped away. Seeing the judge running away in a sorry state, the audience felt a mix of emotions. The way they looked at Lung Ruoxue was also filled with deep confusion and intense inquiry. At this moment, there was only Lung Ruoxue left on the stage. She ignored everyone's gazes and laid back on the recliner again. When the audience saw her like this, although the corners of their mouths still twitched uncontrollably, they were obviously much calmer than before. At the same time, the burly man in the private room also stared at the ring in a daze and muttered, "Piapple is so powerful." Whether it was the opponent or the judge, they were almost on the verge of collapse from her torture. And for the contestants who walked down the stage alive, other than the winner, the other side was also intact. This was definitely a record-breaking record. What he didn't know was that from now on, as long as Lung Ruoxue was still in the arena, this record would continue to be maintained. When Uncle Long heard this, he could only sigh helplessly. "It looks like we won't have a chance to play today." "How do you know?" the demon asked with a faint smile. "With Apple around, we won't even have a chance to play," Uncle Long said gloomily. However, just as he finished speaking, someone came to inform him that it was his turn next. Uncle Long was surprised and expressed that this was impossible. He had yet to exchange blows with his opponent. How could he be allowed to enter the ring now? If he went up now, wouldn't he be fighting with Schwer? He wasn't that stupid. "I'm not going." Uncle Long clearly expressed his opinion. The staff member in charge of passing on the message heard this, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He couldn't help but ask, "Why? What do you mean why? It's not my turn yet, so of course I can't just go up like this. Besides, you're asking me, a divine emperor, to fight a deity. Aren't you trying to embarrass me? Besides, shouldn't they draw lots to decide who would play against Apple? I'm not in the same group as Apple, so why should I listen to you? Tell your boss to stop thinking about me. I will definitely not go on stage." Uncle Long's attitude was very firm. Don't tell me you want to be disqualified." The staff member's eyes were wide open as he shouted in disbelief. "Are you threatening me? I'm telling you, I'm not someone who's scared," Uncle Long said fiercely and released a trace of his pressure. Immediately, the legs of the staff member who passed the message went soft and he almost knelt on the ground. Of course, Uncle Long was only trying to scare the staff member. He quickly retracted his aura. The staff member, on the other hand, was so scared that he ran away before he could even catch his breath. "Uncle Long, you're the one who doesn't fight in the arena." After the staff left, Ming Song couldn't help but tease him. Uncle Long glared at Mingji and said, "Now that Apple is in the ring, why should I go? I'm not going to fight her." Right. We can't kill each other." The burly man agreed, but then he was a little worried. "But is it really good to offend the city lord's mansion like this?" "This isn't offending, this is the character of the strong. Don't worry, the city lord will not blame us for such a small matter." Uncle Long patted the burly man's shoulder and promised. "I hope so." The burly man was still worried, but he didn't show it. Thanks at this moment, Lung Ruoxue had been waiting on the stage for a long time. Not only did no one come up, even the judge was nowhere to be seen. She was the only one in the huge arena, and she felt really lonely. After an unknown period of time, Lung Ruoxue finally received her verdict. There was another young man with him. When the young man saw Lung Ruoxue, he smiled and nodded as a form of greeting. Lung Ruoxue nodded her head as well. She then raised the whip in her hand and asked, "Do you want to admit defeat?" "Yes, I admit defeat." The young man nodded. Admitting defeat was the wisest move. He didn't want to be forced to admit defeat like the previous two. In this day and age, people still had to know their own limits. A wise choice. "Referee, please change your player." Lung Ruoxue turned to look at the judge with a smile. The judge was a little angry. He had finally chosen an opponent for Apple, but who knew that this kid would admit defeat before even saying a few words? This fact made the referee so depressed that he did not know what to say. However, admitting defeat was allowed by the rules, so he couldn't disagree. However, he still gave the young man a warning look and reminded him, after you admit defeat, you can't go on stage for a week. You'd better think it through. I've thought it through, the young man nodded. Compared to losing face, not competing for a week was nothing. With that, he walked straight down the ring. With her opponent gone, Lung Ruoxue could only continue to seek help from the judge. The judge was a little mad. In fact, the reason why he was gone for so long was mainly to discuss with his boss how to arrange an opponent for Apple. They wanted Uncle Apple to fight and the uncle and nephew to kill each other, but the uncle refused. It was obviously against the rules to force the opponent to fight, so they didn't dare to make it public. They could only pretend that nothing had happened. In addition, the competition was divided into 5 groups. Logically, each group should have a chance to go on stage. However, because of Lung Ruoxue, the young lattice competition had been completely disrupted. If this continued, the competition of the other groups would be in a mess as well. The judge was very sad. However, the woman in front of him was obviously stubborn, so the referee had no confidence in convincing her to give up the game. As expected, Lung Ruoxue, who was clear about the judge's thoughts, smiled faintly and urged, "Judge, hurry up. I've placed a huge bet on myself, so I must win. Hurry and arrange an opponent for me. I've been waiting so long that I'm about to fall asleep." The judge stared at Lung Ruoxue for a long time. In the end, he could only helplessly go and make arrangements for the manpower. The following opponents went up the stage one by one. However, for some reason, all of them admitted defeat without exception. This made the live audience feel incredulous. How did this happen? Such a thing had never happened before. At this moment, the demon and the others in the private room also received the notice to draw again. After looking at each other, Evildoer and the rest went to draw lots obediently. When they drew lots, they didn't even ask why. As for the results of the drawing, they naturally avoided Lung Ruoxue. After a day of competition, Lung Ruoxue was definitely the most relaxed arena defender. Of course, she was also quite satisfied with the result of winning without a fight. At night, as they sat in the living room, Uncle Long looked at the calm Lung Ruoxue and could not help but ask, "Shuer, what's going on today? Why did all those people admit defeat?" Chapter 29-20. The Domineering Lung Ruoxue, 3. I've asked Azure to warn them, Lung Ruoxue replied calmly. But Uncle Long and the others were puzzled and looked at Lung Ruoxue. There's something strange about that arena. It's sucking blood. That's why I want to starve it for a few days. Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. Sucking blood? Uncle Long and the others were shocked. This was too unexpected. That arena was set up for the thing below, and I naturally don't want to let that thing succeed. Lung Ruoxue revealed. What's that thing below? Is it the same as the City Lord? Uncle Long asked again. If I'm not wrong, our old friend, the Blood Cherry Blossom, should be waiting to eat us down there with its mouth wide open. Lung Ruoxue replied honestly. Uncle Long and the rest trusted Shui Air's judgment. After all, Sung and Green Vessel probably knew about this as well. Shui, what should we do next? Dongfang Yu asked after a long silence. Just wait. When the Blood Cherry Blossoms die of hunger, they'll have achieved my goal. Lung Ruoxue said with a smile. That fellow feeds on blood. If there's no blood supply, I'm afraid it will go crazy. Uncle Long laughed when he heard Shui Air's plan. Isn't that great? Lung Ruoxue said matter-of-factly, and the few of them laughed in understanding. However, what Lung Ruoxue didn't expect was that after not consuming a large amount of blood for a day, the Blood Cherry Blossom would go crazy. In an underground secret room of the City Lord's mansion, the City Lord stood in front of a giant red flower with a face full of fear and trepidation. He looked at the other party carefully and fawningly. My lord, calm down. Calm down. I haven't eaten anything for almost a day, and am starving. How am I supposed to calm down? Or are you planning to treat yourself as food for me to eat? The brutal blood cherry blossom flame roared as it swayed its huge petals. My lord, I am your most loyal subordinate. If you eat me, who will find food for you? Hearing this, the city lord's face paled in fright and he hurriedly said, You still have the face to say that you'll find me food? I've been hungry the whole day. You piece of trash, are you trying to starve me to death? I'm telling you, if you don't want to serve me well, just say it. I will report to the Divine Master and ask him to remove you from your position. Blood Cherry said viciously, My lord, I'm innocent. I've been trying my best to find food for you, how can you doubt my loyalty? What happened today was just an accident. Please believe me, it will never happen again. The city lord promised. Since you've said so, I'll give you another chance. Seeing that she had scared him enough, the blood cherry blossom said magnanimously, then asked, What happened today? Why was there only a little bit of food falling from the arena? It's not even enough to fill the gaps between my teeth. There was an accident. When a woman called Apple was guarding the ring, her opponents all admitted defeat, so there was no food. The city lord said honestly, Is that woman very strong? Hearing this, Blood Cherry Blossom could not help but ask. He's not strong. He's just a small deity. The city lord immediately replied. Then why did my food all admit defeat? The Blood Cherry Blossom roared. As she said this, she became angry and agitated again. They don't want to fight with women. The city lord said carefully. This was the reason given to him by everyone who had admitted defeat. What kind of bullshit reason is this? Do you discriminate against women? The Blood Cherry was furious and she ordered, Go and capture those who have admitted defeat. I want to eat them. My lord, we can't do this. That would be too eye-catching. The city lord stopped him. Although people died every day in the city of abandoned ruins, it would be too conspicuous if too many people died at once and all of them disappeared without a trace. As the city lord, the last thing he wanted to see was to anger the masses, which was not conducive to his rule. No? I'm hungry now, what do you think I should do? Blood Cherry Blossom was going crazy. Couldn't she just let the flower live? It needed nutrients. So much nutrition. I can only send one person to you at most. The city lord said after thinking for a while. He didn't want to offend the Blood Cherry Blossom too much. If the other party tried to make things difficult for him in front of the Divine Master, it would be enough to make him suffer. How can one be enough? Do you know how hungry I am? Blood Cherry Blossom was clearly dissatisfied with the other party's perfunctory reply. My lord, we have to continue developing. If you eat all the people, there will be no one left in the city of abandoned ruins. You will be even more hungry then. The city lord warned. But you can't make me eat only one person, unless the other party is a reverent god. The Blood Cherry Blossom said hatefully. Reverent god? Were Reverend God level cultivators that delicious? More importantly, Reverend God level cultivators were not easy to catch. Thanks, my lord, I can't catch the supreme divinity. Why don't you have some snacks first? I'll send people to kill the apples tomorrow, and you'll have food again. The city lord suggested after some thought. You're really trash. By the way, are there still no news of the 3 phoenixes? The Blood Cherry Blossom said in disdain, and continued to ask. Not yet, the city lord said honestly. They were so seriously injured, but they still managed to escape. Tell me, what use do you have? The Blood Cherry Blossom roared angrily. When the city lord heard this, he felt extremely aggrieved. He couldn't help but complain in his heart. Back then, when we were dealing with those 3 phoenixes, didn't you also take action? He still didn't catch her, so why was she blaming him now? The grinding hasn't even ended and you want to kill the donkey already? Although he was dissatisfied, the city lord did not dare to voice his complaints. He said, My lord, I've sent someone to find food for you. After saying that, the city lord left gloomily. However, what made him even more depressed was that the guards in the residence had been busy for the whole night, and they had not caught a single person when it was close to dawn. Not only that, but the guards were all seriously injured. The wounds on his body were all claw marks. Looking at the wound, which was obviously caused by a beastie, the city lord was a little confused. Since when did such a powerful beast come to the city of abandoned ruins? Why did he not know about it? Looking at the wounded guards who were on their last breath, he didn't know how to tell the blood cherry blossoms the bad news. After thinking for a moment, he didn't dare to meet the blood cherry blossom. After being starved for an entire day, the blood cherry blossom became even more brutal. After daybreak, Lung Ruoxue and the rest finished their breakfast and headed straight for the arena. After entering the arena, Lung Ruoxue was surprised to find that the person who had admitted defeat yesterday was also present today. Didn't they say that if they admitted defeat, they could only continue to participate in the competition a week later? Did the rules change? The rules had indeed been changed, and Lung Ruoxue's match time had also been pushed back. This had caused Lung Ruoxue, who was supposed to continue being the guard this morning, to be given an unknown time when she would be able to go on stage. Perhaps her chance to go on stage had already been taken away. At the thought of this, Lung Ruoxue immediately raised a protest and requested to continue defending the ring. When the staff member heard this, he felt his head throb. They knew that this apple would not be easy to deal with. Wasn't this openly going against the city lord's mansion? However, Lung Ruoxue clearly didn't care about that. If she couldn't go on stage, how could she starve the blood cherry blossoms? Miss Apple, this is the city lord's mansion's arrangement. Please follow the rules. Helplessly, the staff members carried them out of the city lord's mansion. The rules? Hadn't the rules been set long ago? What reason did he have to change the rules at the last minute? Was this fair to the arena lord? I want to protest. Your city lord's mansion doesn't put us in your eyes at all. Seeing that I'm about to win, you change the rules at will and infringe on my rights and interests. I'm going to file a complaint to the Divine Master's estate. You're disgracing the participants by doing this. Don't you guys agree? Lung Ruoxue's entire body was emitting an icy cold aura as she berated him. After she was done berating him, she looked at the other participants with a look of hatred. Although the other participants shared the same thoughts as Lung Ruoxue, they did not have the guts to criticize the city lord's mansion in public like Lung Ruoxue did. After all, it would be very difficult for them to live in the city of Forsaken Land after offending the city lord's mansion. Furthermore, there was no need for them to go against the city lord's mansion for a woman. Hence, when Lung Ruoxue looked at them, they all lowered their heads in unison. Lung Ruoxue only laughed coldly when she saw this. No wonder these people were kept as food. With their cowardice, they were destined to become food. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue didn't pity them at all. At the same time, Uncle Long and the others, who had received Shui Er's signal, expressed their strong protest. Knowing that they were together, the staff member wanted to cry but had no tears. Not only that, Lung Ruoxue even pushed aside the staff members in front of her and stepped onto the stage calmly. She was going to continue to guard the ring today. She wanted to see who could get her down. At this moment, other than the judge, there were no other participants on the stage. Even though the judge was not the same as yesterday, he could not help but shiver when he saw Lung Ruoxue, who was emitting a cold aura. So, is this woman really just a god? Why did he feel that the other party's aura was even stronger than that of a reverent god? Judge, you found out the truth. As she stood on the stage, Lung Ruoxue's beautiful eyes surveyed her surroundings. She smiled faintly and said, "Today, I'm still the arena lord. Anyone who wants to challenge me can come up. Miss Apple, come down. You can't do this. This is against the rules." Seeing this, the staff member was so anxious that he was about to cry. The rules? Are you talking about the old rules, or the rules that were changed because of me? To tell you the truth, without my permission, no one can change the rules. If there's really a need to change it, it can only be me. Lung Ruoxue glanced at the staff member who was jumping up and down in anxiety as she spoke loudly in a domineering manner. The staff member had never seen a contestant so disobedient, so overbearing, so troublesome, so he was a little dumbfounded. The live audience was also petrified. Oh my God! What was this situation? Chapter 29-21. The outside world is too dangerous, 1. No one present had expected Lung Ruoxue to be like this. This was simply too shocking, so much so that they were unable to return to their senses for a long time. However, when they came back to their senses, the staff member was in tears, while the live audience could not help but treat Lung Ruoxue as their idol. This woman before them was definitely the first to dare to bully the arena staff in such a manner. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue took out the reclining chair as usual and laid down leisurely. She looked so relaxed that it made people envious. However, how should he deal with this matter? The woman in the ring was obviously not a good person. At the thought of this, the staff member had a headache and did not know what to do. Helplessly, he could only report this matter to his immediate superior. When the boss heard the staff member's words, he was silent for a long time before saying, "Go to the city lord's mansion and report this to the city lord." Yes. The staff member turned around and left, leaving Lung Ruoxue on the stage to be ignored. After an unknown period of time, the staff members slowly appeared. With a cold smile, Lung Ruoxue said unhappily, "Are we still fighting today? Hurry up and start, don't delay me from making money. Isn't it too easy to earn that money?" He didn't even make a move and he already got his appearance fee. The staff member said, "Miss Apple, please wait a moment." "Well, start immediately. Your work efficiency is so low. I'll give you some training when I have time." Lung Ruoxue was still unhappy. Hearing that Lung Ruoxue wanted to train her, the staff member's mouth twitched. "It's already good enough that you can keep your life later, and you want to train us?" The staff obviously did not think well of Lung Ruoxue, but Lung Ruoxue did not care. She waved the long whip in her hand again. When the staff saw this, he hurriedly said with his heart palpitating, "The match is about to begin." With that, he jumped off the ring. So, the woman on the stage is a tiger, a really scary bird. He really didn't want to stay in the ring for even a second longer, or else the one who would lose his little life would probably be him. The judge, who was already trembling and had weak legs, finally stopped being so afraid and ran down the stage. Now, only Lung Ruoxue was left on the stage. Fortunately, Lung Ruoxue did not have to wait long before a middle-aged man came up to her. This middle-aged man was obviously not one of the participants that Lung Ruoxue had seen before. More importantly, the man in front of her had the strength of a divine emperor. At the thought of this, Lung Ruoxue could not help but smile. It seemed like the other party was prepared to kill her. Very good. Lung Ruoxue was satisfied with the other party's vicious aura. However, she still felt that she should be polite before resorting to force, so she still asked, do you want to admit defeat?" "Admit defeat? I won't admit defeat. I'm here to kill you." The middle-aged man laughed gloomily and shouted, "I see. Then let's start," Lung Ruoxue said with a smile. Then she stood up and floated in midair, before directly lashing out with her long whip. The long whip flickered with sparks as it went straight for the middle-aged man. On the other hand, the middle-aged man unhurriedly got into his formation. It was obvious that he did not care about Lung Ruoxue. When the long whip reached his side, he simply grabbed it. Just as he was about to say something in a pleased manner, he suddenly felt a pain in his arm. A small flame had started burning on his arm. In the next second, the audience watched as the middle-aged man on the stage disappeared from their sight. "Thanks, where is he?" The audience didn't expect the middle-aged man to run away without a fight. What the hell is this? He was really a good-for-nothing. Instantly, disdainful voices rose and fell from the crowd. Only Lung Ruoxue knew that the middle-aged man was dead. To put it more accurately, it was evaporated by her little flame. Of course, she did this without anyone knowing and no one would find out. After the middle-aged man disappeared, the staff member was very puzzled and immediately sent people to look for him. However, after searching the entire arena, they could not find the middle-aged man's whereabouts. Helplessly, they could only report this matter to the city lord. After the city lord found out, his brows furrowed so tightly that they could squash a fly. He couldn't figure out where a living person had gone to. He wasn't in the arena, and he didn't return to the city lord's mansion either. He just disappeared into thin air. This was really too inconceivable. After thinking about it for a long time, the city lord still couldn't figure out what was going on, until the staff reminded him that Apple had been waiting in the ring for a long time and kept clamoring for them to quickly find someone to challenge. The city lord was angry and depressed, but he still sent out another expert to fight. The previous one was also an expert raised by their city lord's estate. Although he wasn't the strongest, the city lord felt that dealing with a small deity would be a piece of cake. Who knew that that person would disappoint him too much and make him lose face? At this moment, he had already decided that he would punish that person severely when he returned. Unfortunately, what he didn't know was that not only that person, but all the people he had sent would probably not be coming back. At the same time, Lung Ruoxue, who was sitting on the stage with a cold face, was releasing a frosty aura. It was obvious that she was in a bad mood. The audience also knew why she was like this, so they were so nervous that they didn't even dare to breathe. After a long time, "Where are they?" Lung Ruoxue shouted. "Are they all dead? Come out and catch your breath. Little ancestor, what's wrong with you again?" The staff member asked unwillingly. "I have no opponents again. The previous one is missing." Lung Ruoxue said, pretending to be innocent. "We're currently looking for one for you, so please be patient." The staff tried to persuade her carefully, afraid that Lung Ruoxue would flip out. But it was a pity that not only was Lung Ruoxue unable to persuade him, she became even angrier and threatened, "I'll give you another 5 minutes. If I don't see anyone playing, I'll smash this place." A battle? There's not even a single challenger. Upon hearing this, the staff members were in a mess. "Little ancestor? It's not that we can't find anyone to challenge you, but the competitors are all unwilling to fight you. If we admit defeat as soon as we step onto the stage, we won't be able to harm you at all, and we're even wasting our time." What a big tone. At this moment, a mocking voice was heard. The staff member looked at it and quickly retreated and hid. The person who spoke was a young man who looked to be in his early 20s. However, from his eyes that seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life, Lung Ruoxue knew that this person was definitely not young. Following that, the young man walked up to the arena and sized Lung Ruoxue up. "Woman, do you want to die? You're the one who's looking for death." Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly. Another cannon fodder of the city lord's mansion. He had a rotten smell on him, which was really annoying. The moment Lung Ruoxue had such a thought, a voice rang out in her head, "Purify him! Purify him!" Instantly, she began to sweat like a waterfall. Needless to say, the one that was so brave must be her life flame that had been restless recently. However, she also had such thoughts. Chapter 29-22. The outside world is too dangerous. 2. Woman, you will regret saying such words. Lung Ruoxue's provocation made the young man feel humiliated. Hence, he spat out some harsh words. Hearing the other party's words, Lung Ruoxue smiled radiantly and said, "You're not the first one to say that to me, and you won't be the last one either. But the result is that they're all dead, while I'm still alive and kicking. Don't be too pleased with yourself. Today is the day you die." When the young man saw how stubborn Lung Ruoxue was, he was so angry that he almost couldn't speak. "I hope it will be as you wish." Lung Ruoxue laughed as she lashed out with her long whip. The long whip that was burning with an insignificant flame happily pounced towards the young man. However, the young man did not catch the whip with his bare hands like the middle-aged man before. Instead, he dodged the whip nimbly, but a flame still managed to reach the man's clothes. When the young man saw this, he hurriedly tried to extinguish the fire. Lung Ruoxue did not take advantage of the situation and merely stood by the side and watched. Who knew that the originally small flame would grow bigger and bigger? In the end, under everyone's gazes, the young man also disappeared. Did he run away to put out the fire? How unprofessional. The battle had just started. Why did he run away again? The audience automatically imagined this and was deeply dissatisfied. The 2 matches had just begun, and the challengers all ran off on their own, leaving the ringmaster on the stage. This was the first time something like this had happened in history. Instantly, Lung Ruoxue became the target of sympathy for many in the audience. They deeply felt that Lung Ruoxue really had it hard. After waiting for so long and finally finding an opponent, this was the result. Of course, Lung Ruoxue had no idea what they were thinking. Otherwise, she would definitely be depressed. When the city lord received the report again, he was so angry that his face turned green. Why were they all like this? The city lord was furious, and the consequences were severe. He had already decided that when those two returned, he would definitely punish them severely. Who asked them to retreat without a fight? This was simply disgracing the city lord's mansion. However, even though he was angry, today's battle had not ended yet, so he still had to send people. This time, he sent 2 people. He thought that he could kill Apple in one fell swoop, but who knew that he would be the one missing again? Losing 4 subordinates at once, the city lord couldn't help but become suspicious. This matter was simply too strange. That shouldn't be the case. Although his 4 subordinates were only at the divine emperor level, it was still easy to kill a deity. Why did they go missing? The city lord could not figure it out. However, at this moment, he did not realize that everything was Lung Ruoxue's doing. This was because the Lung Ruoxue in his eyes was simply too weak. It was so low that he couldn't bear to look at it. However, it was a fact that they had gone missing. Of course, it was also possible that the 4 of them had fled to avoid punishment. To be honest, as the lord of a city, and the 4 men were the elites in his hands, he really didn't want the latter result. He would rather his 4 subordinates go missing. However, he had no clue at all, so he couldn't make an immediate judgment. The only thing he was clear about was that if he couldn't kill Apple today, the ancestor below would probably be furious again. Because half a day had passed, that person didn't smell any blood at all. He didn't need to think to know that it wasn't peaceful down there. But he couldn't care so much, and he couldn't be blamed for this. Sighing, the city lord could only bitterly continue to send people. The main task today was to kill that Apple. The city lord's idea was wonderful, but the result was disappointing. The people he had sent after that had also disappeared, and none of them had returned. Such a fact simply made the city lord fly into a rage. Thanks as for Lung Ruoxue, after she was done with today's battle, she returned to her residence with the demon. Uncle Long, who didn't have the chance to fight today, sat in the living room and looked at Lung Ruoxue with a bitter expression. "Shuer, you're in the limelight today. We've been deprived of our chance to play again." "Did I?" Blinking her eyes, Lung Ruoxue was very calm. "Of course there is. We've been spectators for the whole day." Uncle Long sighed. Hearing the jealousy in Uncle Long's tone, Lung Ruoxue couldn't help but laugh. "Uncle Long, I'm doing this for your own good. That thing down there is not easy to deal with. Once I force it out, you'll have the chance to fight. Then what about your man? We've already placed a bet." Uncle Long could not help but ask. Calm down, you'll still have a chance to appear." Lung Ruoxue was very confident. However, at this moment, the city lord's residence was not peaceful at all. The city lord, who had been hiding from the blood cherry blossom, was unable to avoid it. He was directly dragged into the ground by the enraged blood cherry blossom. The only thing the city lord could do in the face of the enraged blood cherry blossom was to placate it. However, the blood cherry blossom was simply too hungry. No matter how the city lord tried to placate it, it would only shout, "I want to eat. I want to eat. Sir, please wait. I've already sent my subordinates to capture him for you." The city lord continued to placate her, but Blood Cherry Blossom clearly didn't believe him. She immediately roared, "I don't need you, I'll catch it myself." With that, the Blood Cherry Blossom shrunk to the size of a palm and floated out of the secret chamber. Seeing this, the city lord quickly stopped it and said, "My lord, you can't leave this place." He had a terrible headache. If the Blood Cherry Blossom left this place, it wouldn't take long for it to dry up. More importantly, the Blood Cherry Blossom's strength would be greatly reduced once it left this secret chamber. Therefore, for its safety, the city lord absolutely couldn't let it leave. Otherwise, if something really happened, he wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility. However, the Blood Cherry Blossom was famished and couldn't care less. Right now, there were only 2 words in its heart: eat. Then, ignoring the city lord's advice and furiously injuring the city lord, the blood cherry walked out of the underground secret chamber without a care for anything else. The danger had indeed increased after coming out, but the blood Sakura believed that no one in the city of abandoned ruins would want to kill it. The most important thing now was to eat. Humans are iron, rice is steel. One less meal would make one famished. In fact, flowers were the same. He also needed to eat. On the way out of the secret chamber, they encountered many guards of the city lord's manor. The blood cherry blossom immediately drooled all over the ground. However, rabbits did not eat the grass near their nests, so it knew that these guards could not be treated as food for it. Suppressing her hunger, the blood cherry blossom floated out of the city lord's mansion. Although it saw many people on the street, the blood cherry blossom was still intelligent. It knew that it had to be careful and secretive when doing bad things and not attract attention in public. Thus, it could only carefully observe those who were alone and plan to wait for the opportunity to devour them in one fell swoop. However, after observing for a long time, it realized that the people were all in groups, leaving it with no way to attack. Immediately, the blood cherry blossom went crazy. How detestable! How detestable! These humans were too detestable. Was he going to force it to hunt small animals outside the city? In fact, it liked human blood the most and was not interested in animals. However, it was obviously unrealistic to catch people to suck their blood, so after thinking about it, it could only move unwillingly to the suburbs. Chapter 29-23. The outside world is too dangerous. 3. As the place it went to became more and more remote, the sky became completely dark. However, along the way, the blood cherry blossom did not encounter a single beast, much less a person. The blood cherry blossom's mood was getting worse and worse, and she was deeply worried. It had such a noble status, so how did it end up needing him to come out and find food? It's all because the city lord is too useless. Otherwise, it would not have needed to do it by itself. The other party should have taken the initiative to offer it food. Now, it had to rely on itself even though it was hungry. This was something that the blood cherry blossom, who had always lived like a prince, could not accept. There seemed to be a rabbit there? With the help of the moonlight, the begrudging blood cherry blossom suddenly discovered a snow-white rabbit lying on the grass not far away. Eating grass? As she moved over bit by bit, the blood cherry blossom drooled all over the ground again. This rabbit was really too fat. It wanted to eat. It wanted to eat. The rabbit in front of it was the safest food it had encountered since leaving the city lord's mansion. It was alone, unremarkable, and the most ordinary of beasts. Furthermore, they were in the wilderness. If it ate a rabbit here, no one would notice anything unusual. Thinking of this, blood cherry blossom became excited. When it slowly moved to the fat rabbit's side, the fat rabbit suddenly turned its head and looked at the little red flower that was floating over in a silly way. It was no wonder people said rabbits were stupid. It was indeed so. Not only did he not have any sense of danger, but he was also staring at it without blinking. Be good, shout. Quickly come into sister's arms. Don't run. Don't run. Two tiny tentacles stretched out from the blood cherry blossom's pistol and wrapped around the fat rabbit's body as fast as lightning. The fat rabbit did not struggle at all and obediently allowed itself to be tied up, but its eyes were filled with curiosity as it stared at the blood cherry blossom. As expected, he was a fool. Blood cherry blossom looked at the fat rabbit's state and thought to herself, but it doesn't matter if it's a little stupid. It's just food after all. At the thought of this, the famished blood cherry blossom no longer hesitated. It immediately stabbed the sharp spikes on its tentacles into the fat rabbit's body. But at the same time, it heard a crack. The spike actually broke. Then she felt pain in her tentacles. Shwe Cherry Blossoms was depressed. How did this happen? Pulling aside the fur on the fat rabbit's body, the blood cherry blossom took a closer look. It was no different from ordinary rabbit skin. Why was it so hard? The blood cherry blossom, unwilling to give up, grew 2 more sharp thorns and stabbed down, but with another crack, the thorns broke again. This time, it was even more painful than the last time. The fat rabbit didn't seem to realize the danger it was in. It only stared at the blood cherry blossom with its innocent black eyes. The blood cherry blossom was furious. She violently shook the fat rabbit's body and roared, "Damn it! What the hell are you? Are you still a rabbit? How could he have such a tough skin? Can't you let me eat?" The fat rabbit blinked its black eyes innocently. "Motherfucker! You're still pretending to be innocent?" The blood cherry blossom was so angry that she was about to go crazy. The fat rabbit seemed to be quite curious about it. It stared at the blood cherry blossom for a long time without saying a word. Then it reached out with a small paw and touched the bright red petals of the blood cherry blossom. After touching them, it gently pulled with its paw. With a snap, a petal was torn off. The blood sakura was dumbfounded and even forgot to react. However, the intense pain from the broken petal jolted it back to its senses. Following that, it let out an earth-shattering scream. The fat rabbit's claw held the petal, still looking innocent. "I'm going to kill you." The blood cherry blossom flower, which had a petal torn off, endured the intense pain and roared. Hearing this, the fat rabbit only glanced at the blood cherry blossom indifferently. Then, it held the petal in its claw and calmly brought it to its mouth and began to chew. The blood cherry blossom couldn't believe it. The two eyes on the pistil were so wide that they were about to pop out. When it saw the fat rabbit in its grasp calmly swallow one of its petals, it was so shocked that it turned into stone. Thanks, it was only when another excruciating pain came that the blood cherry blossom came back to its senses. Immediately after, it saw another petal caught in the claws of the dead rabbit. It had only taken a glance before the fat rabbit began eating it again. Aha! Pain, anger, fear, confusion, depression, and other emotions simultaneously enveloped the blood sakura. Earth-shaking, heaven-shaking, and heaven-shaking screams rang out continuously. However, the fat rabbit seemed to be unconcerned, pulling the petals of the blood sakura and stuffing them into its mouth again and again. The intense pain continued to transmit to its senses, causing the blood cherry blossom to be in so much pain that it wished it was dead. What kind of monster had it encountered? A flower-eating rabbit? He even dared to eat its petals. Wasn't he afraid of being poisoned to death? At this moment, the blood cherry blossom was filled with intense fear. It had originally wanted to eat the rabbit, but it had actually been bitten by its food. Who could accept such an outcome? And from now on, small animals like rabbits had become the creatures it feared the most. Don't eat rabbits anymore. The blood cherry blossom endured the excruciating pain and let go of its tentacles, wanting to throw the fat rabbit away. However, the fat rabbit's movements were quite swift. Before it was thrown away, its claws flew out and tore off a few more petals. Screaming, the blood cherry blossom fled. The outside world was too dangerous. It was better not to come out. One time, the blood cherry blossom came out to hunt for food on its own, and it was scared half to death. It had to be known that ever since it had been raised by the main body, it had always been pampered. It didn't have to worry about anything, only focusing on drinking blood to strengthen itself. But now, a mere food had created a serious psychological barrier in its heart. The blood cherry blossom even felt that it would never love again. After it ran back to the city lord's mansion, panting heavily, it immediately hid in the underground secret room to recuperate. It did not dare to let anyone know about such an embarrassing matter. Moreover, after a few petals were swallowed, its strength was seriously affected. More importantly, it realized that it was afraid of food. It was disgusted with food. However, the city lord didn't know what had happened to the blood cherry blossom, and he had gone to great lengths to get a bunch of rabbits and put them in front of the blood cherry blossom for it to eat. Who knew that when the blood cherry blossom saw the rabbit, its reaction would be so intense, and it trembled as it asked the city lord to take the rabbit away. Hearing this, the city lord was puzzled. Didn't this flower starve for 2 days? Why was he so resistant to food? "Sir, we can't catch him now," the city lord said helplessly. At night he sent people out again. The guards were also covered in injuries, but the beastie that injured the guards was not caught. "Trash! Get out, get out! Without my permission, you're not allowed to come in and disturb me." Shue Cherry Blossoms was unwilling to listen to the city lord's explanation, and she shouted in excitement. The city lord had no choice but to leave. In the next few days, the arena was held as scheduled. Lung Ruoxue continued to stand on the stage as the arena lord with a domineering air. Meanwhile, the people that the city lord had sent to deal with Lung Ruoxue continued to disappear one after another. After a few days, the city lord clearly felt that the situation was serious. If only one or two of them had escaped, it would still make sense. But all of them had escaped. That was not realistic. However, he couldn't point out any suspicious points because everyone could clearly see that Lung Ruoxue didn't do anything. It could be said that the disappearance of the people he had sent was rather strange. Fortunately, Lord Blood Cherry Blossom hadn't complained about being hungry in the past few days and had refused to see him several times. As such, he was able to calmly ignore her. Meanwhile, the anorexic Blood Cherry Blossom started to wither. A week later, Lung Ruoxue was still active in the arena. Her days were free and easy. It had been almost half a month since she had entered the arena. She felt that as long as she stayed for another half a month, not only would she be able to win a high stake, but Blood Cherry Blossoms might also starve to death. However, the city lord's mansion seemed to have quieted down these 2 days because the number of people sent by a certain city lord was getting fewer and fewer. Sometimes, she only had one opponent for the whole day, and the rest of the time, she would be alone in the ring in a daze. After nearly half a month of stimulation, the staff was obviously used to such things. They no longer panicked and calmly ignored her. This point made Lung Ruoxue rather depressed. However, there were still a lot of people in the audience, and many of them came because they wanted to know who would be able to get her off the ring. On this day, Lung Ruoxue went up to the arena as usual. The first thing she did was to take out a recliner and some snacks, then lie on it. Even though the crowd was used to this, they still couldn't help but sigh every time they saw this. It was so enjoyable to watch the other side fight. At this moment, a powerful pressure suddenly appeared out of thin air. The weak audience was so shocked that their faces turned pale and blood flowed from the corners of their mouths. Meanwhile, the evildoer and the others who were watching the battle in the private room smiled. They knew that the city lord's mansion was finally going to make a big move. He had really made them wait for a long time. However, the city lord's mansion had finally sent out a heavyweight. It was unlike before when they had only sent a few deity emperors to their deaths, and in the end, their strength had dropped to that of a deity king. It's not bad this time. They knew to send out a reverent god. The appearance of the reverent god made the evildoer and the others a little excited, but the burly man who had been with them the whole time was a little worried. This person is so strong. Of course he's strong, he's a reverent god. Uncle Long said indifferently. Arg. Reverent god level. The reverent god of the city lord's mansion was mysterious and powerful. This was bad. Apple was in trouble. Hurry up and make her admit defeat. Otherwise, she'll be dead. The burly man's face was filled with worry, but his words made the demon and the others quite unhappy. Uncle Long directly gave the burly man a hard knock on the head and then roared, "Your sister! You're the one who's going to be unlucky and die. Open your eyes wide and see clearly, no matter who is unlucky or who dies, it will not be my apple's turn." Chapter 29-24. The rabbit is not to be trifled with. 1. The burly man felt wronged after being yelled at by Uncle Long. Although his words were not pleasant to hear, they were true. He recognized the man in the ring. He was one of the 4 reverent gods in the city lord's mansion. Although he was the weakest one, he was still a giant compared to Apple, a small god. Unfortunately, his good intentions had been misunderstood. In fact, he only wanted to say, "Let Apple admit defeat." However, in the current situation, no one would take his suggestion. After he said that, Uncle Long and the others glared at him fiercely, so he didn't dare to say what he was thinking. However, it didn't feel good to have something he couldn't say. The burly man was very worried, but Lung Ruoxue, who was on the stage, was rather calm. She looked at the arrogant hierarch indifferently and asked with a smile, "Do you want to admit defeat?" Admit defeat? The hierarch was stunned. He had heard that this was what the woman in front of him always said, But he didn't expect that this woman would ask him the same question when she saw him. This was really preposterous. However, he automatically assumed that the other party had asked this because she didn't know his strength. "Do you know who I am?" a certain divine master asked after some thought. "My opponent," Lung Ruoxue revealed a faint smile. "Then do you know my strength?" A certain hierarch asked when he noticed that Lung Ruoxue's answer did not satisfy him. "Does your strength matter to me?" Lung Ruoxue asked instead of answering. These words instantly made the proud and confident supreme divinity depressed. What did this woman mean? Shouldn't he first understand his opponent's strength before fighting? At this moment he deeply doubted Apple's intelligence. He felt that she was either ignorant and fearless or stupid. "I'm a reverent god, and you, a puny god, want me to admit defeat?" A certain supreme divinity took a deep breath and shouted at Lung Ruoxue with a displeased expression. Lung Ruoxue was still smiling, and she said in a seemingly speechless manner, "Do you think that you're proud that your strength is comparable to me, a small divine warrior? If I were you, I wouldn't reveal my identity in public and fight a god as a reverent god. You have the nerve to say it, but am too embarrassed to listen." "You," Lung Ruoxue's mocking words made a supreme god's face turn red. He couldn't form a complete sentence for a long time. The audience was also in a heated discussion. No one had expected a supreme god to challenge Apple. Reverent god? Where did it come from? I've never heard of any force having an idol supreme god. It seemed that there was one in the City Lord's mansion, but the reverent god of the City Lord's mansion had always liked to be mysterious and rarely appeared in public, so they were not sure if this person was from the City Lord's mansion. If it wasn't he, it would be fine. If it was, then it would be too embarrassing. Although the people of the City of Desolation were mostly evil, they were not fools. They could tell that the hierarch had come with ill intentions. Coupled with his identity and the fact that this place belonged to the City Lord's mansion, they easily came to the conclusion that the City Lord's mansion wanted to kill Lung Ruoxue. However, Lung Ruoxue was still as calm as the clouds and as light as the wind. It was as if she was detached from the world. They had no choice but to submit to each other. However, they would not sympathize with Lung Ruoxue. They only felt that she was in for a bad time. It was such a pity. In the past half a month, this woman had brought them a lot of fun and had constantly refreshed their world views. Hence, if Lung Ruoxue was really killed by the reverent god before them, they would still be a little reluctant. At this moment, they heard Lung Ruoxue ask again, "Hey, hierarch, are you going to admit defeat?" Thanks instantly, the audience was in a mess. They had lost count of the number of times they had lost count. When they heard this, the audience felt that this woman was really too bold. It was reasonable for her to ask this question when she didn't know the other party's strength. Now that she knew the other party was a reverent god, she still asked this question. Wasn't she just drawing hatred? Shouldn't you be the one to admit defeat at this time? However, it was obvious that Lung Ruoxue would never admit defeat. As for the divine reverend, he was petrified and remained silent for a long time. It was undeniable that a certain supreme divinity had lived for so many years, but he had never met someone like Lung Ruoxue. He had never encountered such a thing. Hence, he did not know how to react for a moment. When he finally regained his senses, he saw that Lung Ruoxue was only smiling at him. She continued to ask, "Your Excellency, do you admit defeat?" "You don't want to admit it," a certain hierarch said through gritted teeth. If he could, he would have torn Lung Ruoxue to pieces to vent his anger. This woman was too detestable. He knew that he was no match for the woman in front of him, so he didn't waste any more time and directly attacked. As soon as the reverent god made his move, the audience held their breaths. They did not even dare to breathe loudly. Countless sympathetic gazes involuntarily drifted towards Lung Ruoxue. Lung Ruoxue, who was on the stage, only smiled when she saw her opponent make a move. She then circled around the stage and dodged, occasionally returning a whip. A certain supreme divinity was completely enraged after failing to hit the target several times in a row. He roared, "Apple, you're dead today. AI, remember what I've said before? Those who have said this to me are all dead." Lung Ruoxue laughed helplessly. Taking advantage of the gap, she lashed out with her whip again. At this moment, the reverend god who was in a state of anger was obviously triggered by her words. As a result, his reaction was half a beat slower, and he was just in time to be swept by Lung Ruox's whip. Instantly, he felt a burning pain in his heart. Unfortunately, before he could say anything, he disappeared under the watchful eyes of the crowd. He ran away again? The audience was already used to such a situation. The burly man in the private room was also dumbfounded. Where are they? He ran away? I guess his mother asked him to go home for dinner. Uncle Long replied calmly. Such an answer made the burly man a little confused, because he knew that the reverend god no longer had a mother. At the same time, Lung Ruoxue, who was on the stage, roared in anger, "Judge, is this the person you've been looking for? All of you are running away and not admitting defeat before you run. What are you trying to do?" The judge who was being questioned was sweating profusely. He didn't know how to answer. Then he rolled his eyes and pretended to faint. Lung Ruoxue was extremely angry. She rudely kicked the timid and useless judge off the stage. The stage was not low, and the judge was not prepared at all. He was kicked off and fell directly to the ground, smashing a deep pit in the ground. Lung Ruoxu's impressive feat of beating up the judge had once again opened the eyes of the audience. This was the first time they had seen a participant beating up a judge. It was too brutal. At that moment, the audience looked at Lung Ruoxue with caution. Chapter 29-25. The rabbit is not to be trifled with, too. The staff member didn't dare to step forward, or he would definitely be the next one to be beaten up. This time, he went straight to the city lord's mansion to report the matter without his superior's instructions. When the city master heard that even the reverend god had gone missing, he was shocked. What was going on? He knew that the situation was serious, but he didn't know what the problem was. He couldn't understand why his subordinates had all disappeared after the fight with the little divine called Apple. He had lost a divine emperor, but he had lost a reverend god, which made his heart ache. It should be known that there were only 4 reverend gods in the city lord's mansion, including him. The 4 of them were also the divine master's secret forces and existed as a surprise force. Now that one of them had suddenly been lost, he really did not know how to explain it to the divine master. Even so, he did not suspect Lung Ruoxue. Firstly, her strength was too low to kill a reverend god-level cultivator. Secondly, they were in a public place with so many eyes watching. It was impossible for her to use any mysterious methods. Otherwise, they would definitely be discovered. Apple wasn't suspicious, but he lost his people. Even if this had nothing to do with Apple, he had to get rid of Apple. That woman must be a jinx. Otherwise, why would his subordinates all disappear after fighting her? At the thought of this, the city master had no choice but to send another reverend god to fight, and repeatedly urged that Apple must be killed. When Lung Ruoxue saw that another godly venerable rank expert had come to challenge her, she was in a great mood. She had heard that there were 4 reverend god-level experts in the city lord's mansion. It seemed like she could eliminate 2 of them today. These were all the hidden powers of the despicable people of the Ripple Mist, and the other party would not use them easily. Thus, Lung Ruoxue naturally did not want to leave them for the Ripple Mist. At the start of the match, was Lung Ruoxue admitting defeat again? Instantly, this newly entered reverend god was also angered. Although he had heard about this woman's eccentric habits before he came and had been mentally prepared, he still couldn't help but be furious when he heard her words. "I'm a reverend god." The new hierarch Flame roared. "Oh, Your Excellency, do you admit defeat?" Lung Ruoxue nodded and asked again. "You're looking for death." This reverend god's temper was obviously worse than the previous one. Under Lung Ruoxue's repeated provocation, he was soon enraged. He did not waste any more time and immediately used his most vicious attack. Due to the hierarch's cultivation technique, he carried a deadly poison on his body. However, he could control the poison and would not use it unless he was facing a strong enemy. Now, out of rage, he had actually used the poison on Lung Ruoxue, hoping to kill her in one strike. His poison was extremely brutal. Once it touched a person's body, it would immediately corrode the person's body and rapidly spread throughout the entire body. Just as he was confidently waiting for Lung Ruoxue to turn into a pile of white bones, Lung Ruoxue was still standing in front of him, completely unscathed. She was looking at him with a smile. How was this possible? In his shock, his face was filled with disbelief. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue's whip also lashed out and directly hit the reverend god, who was in a daze. The small flame on the whip silently ignited, and in the blink of an eye, the reverend god who had suffered a blow disappeared again without any reason. After the second hierarch disappeared, Lung Ruoxue's expression became even more innocent. She then called out to the staff, "Men! What kind of opponent did you pick?" He ran away again. This time, the staff members were even more afraid to appear. As for Lung Ruoxue, after she vented her anger by smashing the stage pole into pieces, she felt a little tired and laid back down on the deck chair. The audience was numb. Until very late at night, Lung Ruoxue was still alone on the stage. After calling for help to no avail, she could only take out her tent, set it up on the spacious ring, and then went in again. Obviously, she was going to sleep here today. This scene left the audience speechless. "Thanks. This is where you're going to stay?" The burly man in the private room looked at the ring in a daze, not knowing how to react. "I have no choice. There's no staff here, so Apple wouldn't dare to go out on their own," Uncle Long said. Uncle Long's words were so natural that the burly man was at a loss for words. At this moment, his feelings were rather complicated. After Lung Ruoxue entered the tent, she immediately moved into the bracelet. After Qingju saw her, he smiled and teased her, "Sister, you're really planning to stay here today? What else can we do? The staff won't show up, so if I go down myself, I'll give them an excuse to kick me out. I'm not that stupid." Lung Ruoxue replied honestly. Sister, the city lord's mansion won't be sending anyone here today, so you can stay here in peace." Qingju laughed. "Yes, green vessel, is Tsang around?" Lung Ruoxue nodded as she asked. It seemed like she had not seen Tsang for a few days. "He's not here. I don't know where that guy went. Is there something big sister wants to see it for?" Qingju asked. "It's nothing. I just want to know what it's been doing recently." Lung Ruoxue smiled. "Sister, that guy must have been causing trouble for the city lord's mansion." Qingju pouted his little mouth and said with slight displeasure, "If he could, he wanted to do that too. But now he couldn't leave the bracelet at all." "If that's the case, isn't the city lord's mansion in a terrible fix now?" Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. His sister had guessed right. The city lord is about to go crazy because of the disappearance of the experts from the city lord's mansion. Qingju gloated. "Then how about we add some more trouble to him?" Lung Ruoxue suggested after blinking her eyes. "All right, what does big sister want to do?" Qingju asked with a smile. "There is news that there are man-eating flowers in the city of abandoned ruins. The missing strong men may have been eaten by the man-eating flowers." Lung Ruoxue said after some thought. "Okay, leave it to me." Qingju nodded and promised to complete the task. After giving her idea, Lung Ruoxue walked into the purple bamboo house. Not long after, the evil demon and the others also entered the bracelet. There was green vessel outside to monitor the situation, so they did not have to worry about anything. Even after hearing that Lung Ruoxue had set up a tent, the staff still did not appear. At this moment, all of the arena's staff had been summoned to the city lord's mansion to receive the city lord's thunderous wrath. 2 reverend god-level experts had disappeared in one day. The city lord's heart ached just thinking about it. More importantly, he had no idea how those people had disappeared. This was what he was most worried about. Looking at the city lord pacing back and forth in the living room, his subordinates, who were waiting to be reprimanded, did not dare to make a sound. At this time, the city lord suddenly raised his head and asked, "What's that woman doing? Have you left the arena?" "Not yet." The person in charge of the arena carefully replied, "Don't bother with her. When she can't stand it anymore and gets off the ring, I'll be her loss." The city lord ordered. "Yes." The person in charge of the arena quickly responded. He didn't dare to say that the other party didn't plan to leave the arena and had already set up camp on the arena. That woman was very smart and thought quite far ahead. Chapter 29-26. The rabbit is not to be trifled with. 3. As he gave the order, the mayor's mind turned to the missing person again, but after thinking hard for a whole night, he still couldn't figure out the reason. The next day, the news of man-eating flowers eating people in the city of desolation came one after another, and there were many versions. Some versions even pointed the finger at the city lord's mansion, saying that the man-eating flowers were raised by the city lord. As soon as the explosive news came out, the people of the city of desolation, who wanted to see the world in chaos, gathered at the city lord's mansion to protest and demand an explanation. Some people even said that there had been people who went missing in their homes, and they suspected that it was also the doing of the man-eating flower. When the city lord heard this news, he was so angry that his face turned green. This was the city of doubts. Wasn't it normal for a few people to go missing? After all, the city of abandoned ruins was not an ordinary city. There were murders happening every day, but no one thought of the man-eating flower. Now, he didn't know where the rumor had come from that the man-eating flower was in his city lord's mansion. As a result, the families who had died before all came to protest against him. Of course, it was said to be a protest, but in reality, it was just to get some benefits. How detestable! This was clearly someone trying to loot a burning house. The city lord was furious. He had never thought that under his rule, there would be someone who would dare to ask him for money. Wasn't this courting death? After giving a few instructions to his subordinates, the city lord turned around and went to the underground secret room. Although he was very angry with the rumors outside, there was indeed a man-eating flower in his residence. More importantly, the flower hadn't come to him for food after so long, which was abnormal in itself. With a trace of suspicion, the moment he entered the secret room, the city lord directly asked, "My lord, are you related to the disappearance of the experts in the city lord's mansion?" "What?" The extremely weak Shue Cherry Blossoms weakly glanced at the city lord, confused by his words. He was hungry. I'm really hungry. However, it could not eat anything. "Did you eat the experts of the city lord's mansion?" Seeing that Blood Cherry Blossom did not understand, the city lord could only ask again. "I didn't eat it." The Blood Cherry Blossom did not know why the city lord was asking this, but it still honestly replied. At the same time, it felt a trace of anger. Was this fellow questioning it? What right did he have to question it? Then why did they go missing? The city lord continued to ask, unwilling to give up. "How would I know?" The blood Sakura flame roared. It had not eaten for many days, and had not gone out either. How would it know how the person the city lord spoke of had disappeared? There's a rumor outside that there's a man-eating flower that eats people. Seeing that the Blood Cherry Blossoms seemed to be a little angry, the city lord could only explain. "You suspect that I did it?" The Blood Cherry Blossom was enraged. "Other than you, sir, the city of abandoned ruins does not have this kind of thing." Although he didn't want to suspect the Blood Cherry Blossom, it was indeed the most suspicious. Furthermore, it hadn't asked him for food in the past few days, so the city lord couldn't help but wonder if the flower had gone to find food by itself and had already eaten all of his subordinates. After all, the stronger the expert, the more suited the Blood Sakura's appetite. And those who had gone missing were all experts. "I didn't do it. I haven't eaten for days." Seeing that the city lord was clearly trying to frame it, the Blood Cherry Blossom was so angry that its petals began to shake violently. "My lord, we've known each other for so long. I know your appetite very well. In fact, it's nothing if you really did it, but I have to give the Divine Master an explanation." The city lord seemed to be helpless, but the meaning of his words was to admit it. "Just admit it. As long as you admit it, the God Lord won't blame me." However, how could the Blood Cherry Blossom be willing to take the blame for this? Its dull petals shook violently as it roared in anger. "Open your dog eyes and look clearly. I've lost so much weight, how would I have the mood to eat your people?" Hearing the Blood Cherry Blossom's words, the city lord unconsciously raised his head to look at the blood cherry blossom. With a single glance, he was given a huge fright. Oh my God! Was this flower with withered petals really Lord Bloodcherry? That didn't seem possible. It had only been half a month. How did it become like this? The city lord was secretly shocked. He didn't understand how Shwe cherry blossoms had turned him into this. Furthermore, when he had entered, he hadn't raised his head to look carefully. Now that he had seen it, he was so scared that his heart almost stopped beating. My lord, what's wrong? The city lord asked carefully, but in his heart he was thinking, is he sick or hungry? It was fine if he was sick, at least it was none of his business, but if he was hungry, it would be his fault. The Divine Master would not let him off if he knew. I'm hungry. As expected, the words that the city lord least wanted to hear came from Blood Cherry Blossom's mouth. The city lord was shocked again. He had to admit that he hadn't taken good care of the blood cherry blossoms in the past half a month, but he didn't want to. The apple had not been cleaned up, so there was naturally no one who could give food to the blood cherry blossoms. Now, with the man-eating flower incident, the city lord's mansion had suddenly become the target of public criticism. He did not dare to look for food for the blood cherry blossoms with great fanfare. Otherwise, wouldn't all his years of effort be in vain? My lord, there are still some rabbits in the residence. After thinking for a moment, the city lord said, Rabbit? I'm not eating rabbits, tell them to get lost. Get as far away as you can, and don't appear in front of me. The moment Shwe Cherry Blossoms heard the word rabbit, she howled madly as if she had been cursed. It was clear that the rabbit had left a deep trauma in her heart. Thanks, but the city lord didn't understand what was going on. He was somewhat dissatisfied with the blood cherry blossom's uncooperative attitude. She was already so hungry, yet she was still so picky. After thinking for a moment, the city lord advised, My lord, rabbit blood is still blood, please make do with it. He really couldn't find her now. Moreover, there are rumors about the man-eating flower outside. If I go to arrest someone for you at this time, I'm afraid that this crime will be confirmed. I don't want to eat people either. Blood Cherry Blossom said weakly. Hearing what it said, the city lord was truly afraid. You're not eating? What was he trying to do? My lord, your health is important. If you don't eat or drink like this, the Divine Master will blame me if he finds out. The city lord said in fear. It's me who doesn't want to eat. What does it have to do with you? Blood Cherry said listlessly. At this moment, the city lord truly believed that the blood cherry blossom was sick. After patiently asking around, he finally found out that the blood cherry blossom had been frightened by the food when it had gone out alone to hunt. And that food was a rabbit. Not expecting this to be the reason, the city lord's mouth twitched violently. This matter was truly too inconceivable. The mighty blood cherry blossom had been frightened by a rabbit. This was truly too damaging to the dignity of a divine master. However, the city lord still immediately expressed that he would capture all the rabbits in the city to avenge the blood cherry blossom. After figuring out the reason, the city lord naturally had no reason to suspect that the blood cherry blossom had eaten the people from the city lord's manor. Of course, that was unless the blood cherry blossom was lying to him. However, this result gave him a headache. Since it wasn't the blood cherry blossom's doing, the missing person couldn't have disappeared from the face of the earth, right? It had to be said that the city lord was right, because those people had indeed evaporated. It was a pity that this truth would forever remain an unsolved mystery in the city of abandoned ruins. Naturally, Lung Ruoxue would not take the initiative to reveal it. After that, the city lord left the underground secret room and found the guards, ordering them to catch rabbits. Hearing this order, the captain of the guards asked in surprise, City Lord, what about the people gathered outside? You still haven't driven them away? The city lord said unhappily, I drove them away, but they came back not long after. Should I arrest them all? The captain of the guards asked helplessly. Catch him? The city lord had thought of this before, but when he thought of the rumors outside, and how he couldn't immediately feed the blood cherry blossoms if he really caught them, he had a headache. He couldn't possibly stay at home and occupy space, right? Don't worry about them, go and catch me some rabbits. Get all the rabbits in the city, the city lord said cautiously. He felt that first resolving the blood cherry blossom's mental barrier was more important than anything else. As such, be it Lung Ruoxue or those who were causing trouble outside, they were all ignored by City Lord Honghua. Because of the rumors of cannibalism, the number of people who went to the arena to watch the competition had decreased significantly. The staff was nowhere to be seen, leaving Lung Ruoxue alone in the arena to wait for others to challenge her. However, Lung Ruoxue was surprisingly calm. It didn't matter where she stayed. No matter where or when she was, she would not let herself suffer. She would still eat, drink, and sleep well every day. After a week of hard work, all the rabbits in the City of Desolation were finally caught by the guards of the City Lord's mansion. The City Lord put all the rabbits in a huge cage and took the cage to the underground secret room. After entering, he placed the cage in front of the blood cherry blossom and said, "Sir, I've caught all the rabbits in the city. Take a look and see which one it is." "No. Quickly take them away. I don't want to see rabbits." When blood cherry blossom saw the cage full of rabbits, she was so scared that she almost fainted. "My lord, don't be afraid. It's just a weak rabbit. You see, I can kill one with one slap," the city lord encouraged. After saying that, he even took out a rabbit to demonstrate to the blood cherry blossom, and then slapped the rabbit's head. There was a pause sound. The rabbit's head did not shatter, but the city lord's hand actually broke. The pain caused him to scream loudly. That deafening scream caused the blood cherry blossom petals to tremble in fear. It was too terrifying. "I told you, rabbits are not to be trifled with." Shui cherry blossoms trembled as she sobbed softly. Thanks to the city lord, the shadow in its heart grew stronger. "This is impossible. It's not scientific either." After taking a healing pill to heal his hand, the city lord roared in disbelief, and then he struck down with his palm again. This time, the palm was directly shattered into pieces. "Ah!" Looking at his missing palm, the city lord roared madly. "How could this be? How could this be?" The city lord was about to go crazy, especially when he saw the innocent look in the rabbit's eyes. The anger in his heart was rushing to his head. Chapter 29-27, I Want a Refund. 1. Your sister. You're still pretending to be innocent? You're still pretending to be innocent? The furious city lord was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Never in his dreams did he think that this rabbit's head would be so hard. What was going on? Who could tell him? Compared to the rabbit's head, his hand was like an egg hitting a stone. The rabbit's head did not break, but his hand did. Bewildered, he took another healing pill. Although the wound on his wrist had stopped bleeding, his hand would not regrow so quickly. More importantly, he could not wait for his hand to regrow, so he simply used his arm to hit the rabbit's head again. A few loud bangs were accompanied by screams, and then the city lord saw his own arm leave his body. "Ah! How could it be like this?" The intense pain caused the city lord to go even crazier, and the rabbit in his hand once again stretched out its little paw to touch the city lord's face, as if to comfort him. However, the city lord was so frightened by the rabbit's actions that he hurriedly let go of the rabbit. Was this still a rabbit? How could there be such a rabbit in the world? The supreme divinity's body was like paper compared to the rabbit's head. Did he still want the supreme divinity to live? The castellan, who was about to go crazy from the scene in front of him, looked at the rabbit who had an innocent expression and was slowly prancing in front of him. His little heart suddenly beat wildly, and he couldn't help but step back. He even shouted, "Stop! You're not allowed to move. He's just standing there." Hearing this, the rabbit continued to use its innocent little eyes to look at the city lord in confusion, and a trace of grievance appeared on its face. Then, it grinned and said in dissatisfaction, "Do you despise me?" "Yes. I don't like you, so don't come near me." The city lord looked at the calm and composed rabbit, and his heart actually felt fear for no reason. However, the rabbit had obviously become thick-skinned, and it said with a smile, "You said not to get close, so I won't get close? Who do you think you are?" "I am the city lord of the desolate city." This was the first time the city lord had seen a rabbit that called itself a lord, especially when this rabbit spoke so eloquently. This was also rare. This was because rabbits had always belonged to the food family. Those who could speak were definitely the kings among rabbits. However, even if it was a king-level rabbit, it was still a rabbit. That was why the city lord, who was a reverend god-level expert, could not accept that a reverend god-level expert had actually lost to a rabbit. This fact was simply a great humiliation to him. The city lord is nothing. The rabbit clearly did not care about the city lord's identity. As for the city lord, who thought of himself as a noble, he felt depressed like never before. In all his years of life, no one other than God Lord Mist Ripple and Blood Cherry Blossom had ever made him feel so aggrieved. He could now truly feel it. After taking the medicine to stop the pain, the one-armed city lord completely forgot about his fear of the rabbit. He was so agitated that he roared, "I'll let you know how powerful I am." "Hee hee. How do you want to prove it?" The rabbit was quite curious, so it opened the cage and let all the rabbits out. As soon as the rabbits came out, they surrounded the city lord as if they had received some order. Upon seeing this scene, the city lord was in a state of confusion. He had never thought that one day he would be besieged by a group of rabbits. This was really too inconceivable. Thanks, however, the rabbits who were ready to beat him up still looked fearless and glared at him fiercely. This made the hierarch feel that his self-esteem had been seriously hurt. Why did it feel so bad to be despised by a rabbit? The next second, before he could think further, the rabbits all rushed towards him. A group of rabbits rammed into him together, and the force was so great that he didn't dare to imagine it. At this time, the rabbit with a rather hard head was also shot out like a small cannonball. With a bang, the city lord was knocked to the ground. The rabbits took the opportunity to occupy the territory on the city lord's body, and then used their small claws to scratch each other's body. The cloth was cut by sharp claws. The city lord instantly felt a chill. He wanted to get up, but that damned rabbit actually sat on his face and pointed its furry butt at him. This made the city lord quite mad. After a while, the city lord's body began to show signs of spring, and at the same time, he felt as if he had been drenched in water. It turned out that some rabbit had started it, but the rabbits that had occupied their own territory on his body had all raised their hind legs and circled the ground to pee. And Rabbit, who was sitting on the city lord's face, even deliberately showed his eyes for him to admire this scene. Instantly, he almost fainted from anger. With his only hand, he tried to pull the rabbit sitting on his face away, but the rabbit refused to cooperate. It even slapped the city lord's face with its paw, and instantly, the city lord's face was covered in blood. Gritting his teeth and enduring the pain, the city lord did not understand what was going on. Why was he in such a miserable state today? Who could tell him? It was one thing for the indignant city lord to be suppressed by a group of rabbits, but the hateful thing was that he was firmly suppressed several times when he thought about it. This broke his pride as a reverent god-level cultivator. At this moment, a certain rabbit said to the blood cherry with a smile, "Little flower, you like to eat reverent god-level food the most, right? I'll let you eat this, okay?" Can I refuse? Although the blood cherry blossom loved to treat humans as food, it also knew what could be eaten and what could not. And the city lord in front of it was obviously in the inedible category. Otherwise, who would prepare food for it in the future? It couldn't possibly hate food for the rest of its life, right? Unfortunately, its refusal angered a certain overbearing rabbit. The rabbit snorted coldly and threatened, "If you don't eat him, I'll eat you." Ooh. This blood cherry blossom had been pampered since it was born and had always been taken care of in every possible way. Therefore, it had never seen a rascal like the rabbit in front of it. When it heard that the other party was forcing it to eat the city lord, or eat it, it was already trembling in fear. "You don't want it? Do you think that's possible? I'll give you two choices, either you eat him or I eat you." A certain rabbit said impatiently. In order to have some fun, it had been hiding alone for a long time. How could it be so easily rejected by the blood cherry blossom? In short, only one of them could live. "I'll eat it, okay?" The blood cherry blossom wanted to cry, but no tears came out. She was roaring madly in her heart. "I'm innocent. Your Excellency. You can't." Hearing this, the city lord's heart almost stopped beating in fear, but the rabbit was determined not to give him a chance to speak. It slapped the city lord's face with its paw again and warned, "You bastard! Who allowed you to speak? Shut up. Shut up? In your dreams." He was about to be eaten. Chapter 29-28. I want a refund, too. He struggled to get up, but it was as if he was frozen in place, unable to move at all. He didn't know what was going on, but his heart was already burning with more and more fear. Who could answer his questions? Why did it turn out like this? The city lord kept howling in his heart and asked, "There's water inside?" The city lord's speech was already a little incoherent. He had been slapped in the face by a certain rabbit several times. The moment he opened his mouth, his teeth chose to betray, and they fell out with blood. "I'm your ancestor." The rabbit roared domineeringly and slapped the city lord with its claws again. The city lord was instantly in so much pain that he was overwhelmed with ecstasy, did he not? He specialized in hitting people's faces. After that, the rabbit patted its paws and picked up the city lord's tottering collar, throwing him towards the blood cherry blossom with a whoosh. At the same time it roared, "Catch it!" The blood cherry blossom had long been scared silly, but it did not dare to disobey the rabbit's words. It hurriedly extended 2 feelers and tied up the city lord. Seeing this, the city lord begged with tears in his eyes, "Don't eat me. We're partners." Although the blood cherry blossom could tell what the city lord was thinking, it was powerless. If it didn't eat this fellow, it would be the one to die. So, how come even a rabbit from the immortal realm is so powerful now? Do you still want to live well? I won't love you anymore. There's no way to play happily anymore. The blood cherry blossom cried bitterly to itself, and then, ignoring the city lord's pleading gaze, it very disloyal stabbed its feelers into the city lord's body. The taste of blood was extremely delicious, but the blood cherry blossom was in no mood to taste it at all. It even felt that its anorexia was getting worse. One had to know that taking the initiative to eat and being forced to eat were absolutely different, okay? When forced to eat, even the most delicious food would become tasteless in the mouth. However, under the rabbit's calm gaze, it did not dare to disobey its words. Otherwise, it felt that its life would be in danger. Its intuition had always been accurate. At this moment, after the blood cherry blossom began to eat, a certain rabbit suddenly cried out, "Men! The city lord has been eaten." The blood cherry blossom, who had just sucked half of her blood, was stunned when she heard this. What was he trying to do? Didn't you force me to eat it? Did he have to be so shameless? Blood cherry blossom was about to go crazy. However, under the malicious gaze of a certain rabbit, it did not dare to do anything. It could only stare at the other party stupidly and maintain its blood-sucking posture without moving. When the city lord, who was on his last breath, heard a certain rabbit's cry, he was so angry that his eyes rolled back and he fainted. As the footsteps sounded, the blood cherry blossom became rather uneasy. The tied-up city lord became useless. He couldn't eat if he didn't throw him away, and he didn't dare to throw him away. In the end, under Azure's warning glare, the blood cherry blossom couldn't help but speed up its absorption. When the people outside rushed into the underground secret room, the city lord had already become a shriveled corpse. Looking at the huge bright red flower in front of them, with a human-shaped dried corpse tied to the flower's antenna, the guards who rushed in all had red eyes. Did this flower eat the city lord? Thanks, the guards did not know the identity of the blood cherry blossom. So when they saw that the city lord had been eaten by this man-eating flower, they immediately flew into a rage. Then, a middle-aged man ran in. Seeing this scene, he tried his best to calm the guards down and turned his eyes to the blood cherry blossom. The middle-aged man knew the identity of the flower. However, he had never thought that the flower would eat the city lord. What was going on? An inquisitive gaze swept across the blood cherry blossom's body, but the blood cherry blossom did not dare to say a word. It felt wronged. He felt really wronged. The feeling of being wronged and framed by others in all ways was really unpleasant. However, the evidence was right in front of them. Would anyone believe it if it said that it was forced? In addition, under the rabbit's warning gaze, it didn't dare to defend itself. "My lord, what is going on?" the middle-aged man asked after a long time. He was the only reverend god in the city lord's mansion. The city lord had been eaten, and the whereabouts of the other two were unknown. He was the only one left, so he immediately became vigilant. This was the rhythm of something big. He just didn't know who the troublemaker was. And why would Lady Bloodcherry suddenly go crazy? If no one could answer his questions, then all of this would probably become an unsolved mystery. Glancing at the rabbit, the Bloodcherry blossom didn't dare to make a sound. What else could it be? Your city lord was eaten by this little flower. Your rabbit, who was playing with his claws, said indifferently. The middle-aged man was surprised to hear that it was a rabbit who had spoken. When did the rabbit become so bold, not even afraid in front of the reverend god? He deliberately released a bit of pressure to test it, but the rabbits in front of him were not affected, which made him a little at a loss. This didn't make sense. A certain rabbit snorted coldly, and the middle-aged man immediately felt an infinite chill and danger. There was something strange about this rabbit, and it was quite powerful. The middle-aged man immediately came to a conclusion and tactfully withdrew his pressure, not daring to meet the rabbit in front of him head-on. However, the narrow-minded rabbit would not be so easy to talk to after being threatened. Therefore, it also released a trace of pressure, which instantly crushed everyone present. The guards all vomited blood, while the middle-aged man's face turned pale. Even the blood-cherry blossoms began to tremble even more violently when they felt the pressure. It knew that this rabbit was not to be trifled with. When did the rabbits of the immortal realm become so powerful? This was really a blow to the flower's self-esteem. The blood sakura was rather depressed, not knowing what to do. But it didn't dare to say a word. Azure was quite satisfied with the blood-cherry blossom's tactfulness. He then turned to the middle-aged man and said, "Submit or die." The middle-aged man was in tears. This was a blatant threat. Yet, the one who threatened him was an unfathomable rabbit. How could he bear this? Ever since he was born, he had never heard of anyone being threatened by a rabbit. Furthermore, weren't rabbits supposed to be weak food? Why was this rabbit so strong? The middle-aged man could not understand even in his dreams. All of this was too surreal. However, all powerhouses at his level knew their own limits and knew which choice was best for them. Therefore, not long after the rabbit asked him to make a choice, the middle-aged man immediately expressed his willingness to submit. Although submitting to a rabbit was indeed damaging to a reverent god's dignity, what was dignity compared to life? The most important thing was to stay alive. In addition, he could also see that the rabbit in front of him was most likely the mastermind behind all this. Now that the city lord was dead, what was there for him to struggle for? Could it be that he had also been fed blood cherry blossoms like the city lord? Chapter 29:29. I Want a Refund. 3. A certain rabbit was very satisfied with the middle-aged man's intelligence and tactfulness. "Send someone to invite Apple to the city lord's mansion," he ordered. Apple. The middle-aged man frowned. This name was very familiar. Although he couldn't remember where he had heard it before, he quickly gave the order. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue, who was sitting on the arena in boredom, only asked indifferently when she heard that the city lord's mansion had invited her. "I'm guarding the arena and was invited by your city lord's mansion. If someone challenges me, what will happen?" Hearing this, the guard was a little confused. "Oh, my great aunt. The city lord's mansion has changed, and you still want to fight? You're really persistent." The guard could not understand Lung Ruoxue's feelings. Lung Ruoxue did not want to be tricked off the arena like this. One had to know that she was still thinking about the high stakes that the city lord's residence had placed. Moreover, there was still a week before she could get the money. She was not willing to waste all her previous efforts. Since the guard could not give her a satisfactory answer, she would not be so foolish as to leave. The helpless guard could only return to the city lord's mansion by himself. When the middle-aged man saw that the guards did not invite anyone and heard the reason, he was also in a mess. However, he finally remembered who Apple was. As a last resort, he could only personally go and invite people. When they arrived at the arena, before the middle-aged man could introduce himself, he heard Lung Ruoxue say, "If you want to invite me to the city lord's mansion, let's end today's battle first." Hearing this, the middle-aged man's mouth twitched. He thought to himself, what a battle maniac. In reality, he was overthinking things. Lung Ruoxue was not a battle maniac. The other party wanted him to announce the end of today's battle so that he would not be absent when someone else challenged him. Of course, there might not be any challengers, but the city lord's mansion definitely wouldn't dare to invite her with good intentions, so she had to be on guard. Miss Apple. After thinking for a while, the middle-aged man still didn't know how to persuade the battle maniac in front of him. More importantly, he didn't know the relationship between the woman and the rabbit. If he accidentally offended someone and angered the rabbit, it would be his fault. What? Lung Ruoxue blinked her eyes and waited for him to continue. I'm here on Senior Rabbit's orders to invite you all. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before he answered truthfully. Senior Rabbit? When did the city lord's mansion change to a rabbit? Lung Ruoxue asked with a curious smile. Not long ago. The middle-aged man was silent for a moment, and a trace of worry appeared on his face. Miss Apple, please come with me, the middle-aged man said after a long time. It's no problem to walk there, but you have to finish today's game first, or I won't go. Lung Ruoxue still had the same request. Why? The middle-aged man asked, puzzled. No one is challenging you now. It's precisely because no one wants to challenge me that the competition has to end. Otherwise, if someone challenges me when I'm not around, I'll lose if I don't accept the challenge. I've made so many bets, so I'm not going to be a spendthrift. Lung Ruoxue said with an expression that said, don't even think about tricking me. Seeing that Lung Ruoxue clearly didn't trust him, the middle-aged man's mouth twitched. However, he finally understood. The other party was unwilling to leave because she was afraid that someone would take the opportunity to challenge her while she was away. Furthermore, she had placed a bet on herself and was afraid that she wouldn't be able to collect the money. What a money grubber! However, he suddenly remembered that everyone in this group had bet $1 billion. $1 billion! Oh my God! How could he have forgotten about this? No wonder the other party was unwilling to leave the ring. Was he waiting for a month to withdraw the money? There were only a few days left until the 1-month deadline. At the thought of this, the middle-aged man decisively ended the match. Right now, the city lord's mansion was in the hands of a certain rabbit, and the woman in front of him had been invited by Senior Rabbit, so he would invite her back no matter what. He only hoped that Senior Rabbit wouldn't go crazy after hearing that the other party might become the city lord's mansion's biggest creditor. However, his thoughts were obviously unnecessary. After inviting Apple and the rest back to the city lord's mansion, the brutal rabbit immediately turned into a cute little pet and pounced on Lung Ruoxue, shouting, "Girl, I missed you so much." The middle-aged man didn't know how to react. Senior Rabbit called her Apple Girl and was so intimate with her. What was going on? However, he was smart enough not to ask the question in his heart. He just quietly stood to the side and acted as a mural. At this moment, Uncle Long and Dong Fong Yu walked over and smiled at the middle-aged man. Sorry for the disturbance, why don't I see the city lord? He's already dead. Lowering his eyes, the middle-aged man said indifferently. He dead? How did he die? They haven't even made a move yet? Uncle Long and Dong Fong Yu truly thought that Song had only come here to bully the servants and was treated as a distinguished guest under the crushing pressure of his super strength. They didn't expect that the city lord had died and he was now the master of the city. The two of them were a little confused and embarrassed, not knowing what to say. Thanks then, the middle-aged man continued, the city lord's mansion is now in the hands of Senior Rabbit. I've already chosen to submit to it. A wise man is a wise man. If he didn't want to die, he had to surrender. This was the rule that the strong were respected, and everyone had to abide by it. You've made a wise choice. After a moment of silence, Uncle Long patted the other party's shoulder and said. He couldn't help but think to himself, Senior Tsong's claws are really fast. He didn't even inform us beforehand, causing us to be completely unprepared and take over the city lord's mansion. If that was the case, who could they ask for the bet from? Uncle Long could sense the severity of the situation, and he looked at the middle-aged man with an unfriendly gaze. The middle-aged man's heart trembled when he saw Uncle Long's malicious gaze. What was going on? He was very obedient. He didn't say anything that no one would hear, and he didn't do anything that he shouldn't have done. In fact, he was the most low-key among the 4 Reverend God-level experts in the city lord's mansion. So, he really couldn't figure out what had happened. Looking at a certain someone's gaze, it seemed that the matter was quite serious. The middle-aged man was a little uneasy. Even though he was a Reverend Gods also cherished their lives the most. Before the fight, we made a bet that each of us would get 1 billion top-grade crystals. Now, may I ask, how should we calculate this sum of money? Uncle Long saw the confusion on the other party's face, so he had to ask directly. Hearing this, the middle-aged man went crazy. You bastard! Just how much of a money grubber were these people? Apple had refused to follow him to the city lord's mansion because of the bet, and now this middle-aged man was also asking about the bet. What else could he do? The city lord's mansion is already yours, and they've also been trained by Senior Rabbit to be obedient, yet you still want them to bleed? Swallowing his saliva, the middle-aged man carefully reminded, the city lord's mansion is already in your pocket. So what? We're still at a loss. We have 1 billion each, and the ratio is 1 to 100 million. How much is that? Does your city lord's mansion have that much wealth? Uncle Long said with a look of disdain. The middle-aged man was speechless. They were clearly being despised. How did this happen? He really couldn't understand what Uncle Long and the others were thinking. What kind of trouble was this? However, he did not know how to react, so he could only remain silent. At this moment, Song also started to talk to Lung Ruoxue about the city lord's mansion. After Lung Ruoxue heard this, she frowned and asked, this person isn't being controlled by that killjoy? No, I didn't. He has already submitted to me and is my man. Azure smiled evilly. What about the guards? Lung Ruoxue asked again. She didn't think that Song would actually do such a big thing behind her back. Before this, she was still thinking about whether to clean up the city lord's mansion and snatch it for herself. Now, she didn't need to think about it. Song had already made the decision for her. I've also completed the contract. Azure said with a smile. What about the blood cherry blossoms? Lung Ruoxue continued to ask. If she killed the blood cherry blossom now, it would definitely alert the fog, so she was a little hesitant. Keep it for now, I will release a trace of divine sense to keep an eye on it. It's so scared of rabbits now, it definitely won't dare to cause trouble. Azure said confidently. That's good. Lung Ruoxue was relieved. Song was a reliable person, and it was the best choice to keep the city lord's mansion in his arms without alerting the fog ripple bitch. However, the middle-aged man who was being discussed as the main character was not in a good mood at all when he heard the conversation between the man and the beast. Two of you. When discussing how to deal with others, can't you do it behind the back of the person involved? He really couldn't accept the other party's direct way of speaking. However, the Reverend God had a strong mind. He quickly calmed down and became familiar with Uncle Long and the others. The next day, Lung Ruoxue still wanted to fight in the arena. When Lu Fan, the middle-aged man, heard this, he was so speechless that he almost went crazy. Didn't he say yesterday that everything in the city lord's mansion would belong to them? He even handed over the city lord's estate's many years of collection. Why were these people still thinking about the bet? So what if you win? It's all your money. After that, Lung Ruoxue also came to her senses and returned to her room with a gloomy expression. How could he not be depressed? So much money just flew away with little wings. Feeling that he had done something wrong, Song was a little embarrassed. In fact, if the city lord had not captured it, it would not have thought of occupying the city lord's mansion. But now, it was too late to say anything. It was impossible for the city lord to be resurrected, but could the city lord's mansion be retreated? Thinking of this, Song went to Lu Fan and said, "I want to return the goods." Return what goods? Lu Fan was stunned. He didn't quite understand Song's words. "I want to withdraw from the city lord's estate. This way, the city lord's estate can compensate my family's NIU." Azure said matter-of-factly. Lu Fan tried his best to open his eyes wide. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Was he hearing things? Was he hallucinating? Otherwise, why would he feel that this matter was so unreliable? Was this even allowed? Chapter 29:30, Clue 1. Swallowing, Lu Fan said with some difficulty, "Master, everyone in the city lord's mansion has already submitted to you, so why should we still care about the bet? With the arena, we'll definitely be rolling in money in the future, so a little bet really doesn't mean much. We'll be able to earn it back very quickly. Please don't abandon us because of the bet." Lu Fan tried to persuade him, but he was wailing in his heart. "It's already like this and you're still regretting it?" But he had never heard of such a thing. Faced with the fact that he had to return the goods, he was quite depressed, so depressed that he was about to fall into depression. When Song heard his words, he couldn't help but frown and think. His silent appearance made Lu Fan quite uneasy. After a long time, Song looked up at Lu Fan and said, "What you said makes sense." It made too much sense. Hearing Song's words, Lu Fan's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He was touched, he was at ease, and he heaved a huge sigh of relief. "But it'll take a long time to make money, right?" "Thinking about it," Song said. Hearing this, Lu Fan's heart sank. "Master, can we not be so anxious?" He thought. It was better to make money in a long-term way, so he never felt that it was slow to make money. After thinking for a while, he asked, "Master, will there be no city of abandoned ruins in the future?" Last night, he had already found out about Lung Ruox's identity. Hence, he was naturally worried about the future of the City of Desolation. He had lived here for so long and had deep feelings for this place. Hence, he really did not want to see the City of Desolation disappear from the God world. "Why do you say that?" Azure blinked and asked in confusion. As the saying goes, there is a reason for its existence. Since the City of Abandoned Ruins has existed for so many years, there is absolutely no reason to cancel it. "My feeling," Lu Fan said carefully. "Oh, as long as the City of Abandoned Ruins did not disappear, it would always exist. Don't worry. Of course, you must also be wary of the Killjoy bitch." Azure said indifferently. "What's the point of being desperate? It's really possible." Lu Fan believed that if the bitch, rhyme, knew about this, she would definitely fly into a rage and the City of Abandoned Ruins might not be able to survive. Regarding this matter, he was also somewhat helpless. After all, the combat power of the Fog Ripple Slut was not something he could match. Therefore, even if he wanted to protect the City of Forsaken Desolation from being targeted, it was quite difficult. Lu Fan looked at the rabbit in front of him. It was its new master. Lu Fan knew that the rabbit was crucial to whether the City of the Abandoned Ruins would not disappear from the divine world. "Master, the City of Abandoned Ruins is very profitable." After a long silence, Lu Fan gave him a friendly reminder. He could tell that his master's family was a money grubber, and he hoped that this would move his master and protect the City of Abandoned Ruins. Sure enough, Song's eyes couldn't help but light up when he heard this, and he asked with great interest, "Very profitable? How much do you earn?" "The most profitable business in the City of Abandoned Ruins is the challenge tournament. So, as long as we vigorously develop this aspect, there will be no limit to the amount of money we can make." Lu Fan introduced. "Are you sure? However, the City of Abandoned Ruins is too closed and there aren't many customers. I'm afraid that the profit is limited?" When Azure heard this, he thought for a moment. "I can earn a lot. Especially in terms of wagers, the winning rate is very low." Lu Fan said with a smile. "I see." Azure frowned and thought for a while before continuing, "Then I'll take you in temporarily." If this place doesn't make any more money, I'll throw it away. Thanks Tsong's matter-of-fact words made Lu Fan want to run away in tears. Master, can you not be so realistic? The answer was no. If it wasn't realistic, then it wouldn't be Azure. After taking a few deep breaths, Lu Fan changed the topic and said, Master, there are rumors that there are man-eating flowers in the city lord's mansion. We must suppress this matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. There is indeed one. Azure blinked and said honestly. There was, but he couldn't say it. Otherwise, the prestige of the city lord's mansion would definitely decline. Lu Fan thought to himself. But clearly, Song Kai didn't care about the prestige of the city lord's mansion. Because everyone here knew that the city of forsaken ruins belonged to that bitch, Ripple Mist. Therefore, if he wanted to ruin her reputation, it would be her reputation. It had nothing to do with him. Immediately, Azure waved his claws and ordered, pass down the order that there are indeed man-eating flowers in the residence. Lu Fan was shocked. Master, what the hell was this? If this continued, would the city lord's mansion still be able to survive? Are we still going to earn money? Master, it's just speculation outside. Without evidence, they wouldn't dare to make a move. But once it's confirmed, the consequences will be unimaginable. So, please think twice. Lu Fan said worriedly after a long time. I've thought about it. They'll tell the public that the man-eating flower is a clone of rime ice, and its food is blood, so it has to eat a few people every day. In addition, they'll say that it's their honor to sacrifice themselves for the divine master. Azure said with a smile. Was he going to turn against the divine lord's manor? Lu Fan was shocked. Did he not want to make money? Master, aren't you going to earn money? Lu Fan could not help but ask. I'm earning. However, we have to first settle the man-eating flower rumor. Azure said matter-of-factly. But if that's the case, I'm afraid the city of abandoned ruins will be in chaos. Lu Fan reminded him. What are you afraid of? I've been in the city of abandoned ruins for a few days, so I know the situation here very well. You just have to follow my instructions. I'll take responsibility for anything. Song said. Yes. Lu Fan nodded. Since his master had said so, he had no reason to hesitate. Then, Lu Fan turned around and left to handle this matter. Not long after, the news that there was indeed a man-eating flower in the city lord's mansion and that it was an incarnation of Wu Yen spread throughout the city of desolation. For a time, the people in the city of desolation were in a state of panic. They did not dare to loiter on the streets, afraid that they would be the next to become food. However, the chaos that Lu Fan had expected did not come. On the contrary, the people in the city had calmed down. Lu Fan was extremely surprised by this fact. How did this happen? Azure was very satisfied with this result. Everyone had the instinct to avoid risks. If the legendary man-eating flower didn't have such a strong background, the people here might not be so afraid. But now, the result was that everyone who knew the identity of the man-eating flower was all honest. In fact, so what if they were dishonest? Was he really going against the city lord's mansion? What if the city lord's mansion released man-eating flowers and ate them all? He couldn't afford to offend a man-eating flower with a background. Moreover, the city of desolation was closed. It would not be easy for them to leave. Furthermore, if they really went out, they would not have a good life in the divine world. When their enemies came to seek revenge, they would probably die even faster. In that case, it was better to stay in the city of desolation. At least, if the man-eating flower wanted to eat them, it was definitely not something that could be done in a short time. With this thought in mind, the people in the city of abandoned ruins were calm, and their performance made Song quite satisfied. After that, the city lord's manor announced to the public that they would not let the man-eating flowers eat people in the future, and asked them to live here without worry. Chapter 2931. Clue 2. Once this news was released, everyone in the city was excited. That's great, I'm finally alive. This was definitely good news for them. After a few days of silence, the city of the abandoned ruins became lively again. The arena tournament started again and the rules were changed. This time, Lung Ruoxue and the others did not participate. Everyone entered a short period of adjustment. On this day, the burly man, who had been invited by the city lord's mansion and had not returned for several days, came to the city lord's mansion sneakily and asked to see Uncle Long. The guard invited them in. When he saw the burly man in the living room, he carefully observed the surroundings. Seeing that there was no one from the city lord's mansion watching, he asked in a low voice, "Brother, how did you get caught in the city lord's mansion?" He had only found out about this the day before yesterday and had hesitated for a long time. In the end, he had mustered up the courage to visit. Before he came, he had also imagined that Uncle Long and the others might have been interrogated by torture. But after seeing Uncle Long and the others today, he suddenly realized that they seemed to be living quite a comfortable life. They were all white and fat. They didn't look like they were being tortured. However, he didn't think it was right to say that they were warmly received by the city lord's mansion. Who said we were caught? We were invited here. Uncle Long raised his eyebrows. Brother, don't hide it from me. My boss said that the city lord hates you to death, so how could he invite you here? So you have to be careful. The city lord is very narrow-minded. Be careful of his revenge. The burly man said with a worried expression. Thank you for your concern, but he won't have the chance to take revenge. Uncle Long said with a smile. Why? Blinking his eyes, the burly man didn't understand. The city lord you mentioned is already dead. Uncle Long said with a smile. The burly man's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. How is this possible? How did the city lord die? Why didn't they receive the news? No, this can't be true. Brother, don't tease me. I'm not a 3-year-old child. How can I believe this? After a moment of silence, the burly man said, I'm not teasing you. Your previous master is really dead. Otherwise, do you think we could be so carefree in the city lord's mansion? Uncle Long said indifferently. Then who is the current city master? The burly man asked as he swallowed his saliva in shock. It's me. A voice came from outside, but the burly man did not see the person who spoke. Damn it. What are you looking at? Lower your head. After Azure entered, he impatiently shouted. The burly man was very obedient. He looked down and saw nothing but a rabbit. What did she want him to look at? Idiot. Seeing that the burly man was still at a loss, Song said in disdain. He was being scolded. He was actually scolded by a rabbit. The burly man was confused. Since when were the rabbits in the city of abandoned ruins so tough? This didn't make sense. The burly man was secretly worried. At this time, Song said, I am the city lord. Thanks you. These 4 words petrified the burly man. When did this happen? The position of the city lord had actually fallen on the head of a rabbit. Where was the reverent god of the city lord's mansion? Did they all die? So, could it be that they had to listen to this rabbit in the future? After he came back to his senses, he looked at the snow-white rabbit in front of him and felt a little helpless. Go and gather all the major forces. Seeing that the burly man was still in a daze, Azure directly ordered. You want me to gather them? The burly man pointed at himself and said in disbelief. What else? Azure asked. Then what should I say? The burly man's ability to accept things was unusually strong. Although the fact that he had to listen to a rabbit in the future made him very depressed, he felt that it didn't matter who he listened to. Since this rabbit could become the lord of a city, it must have its own extraordinary qualities. He just didn't know where he had passed. However, he believed that as long as he asked his brothers later, he would definitely know. The burly man's thoughts were very beautiful, and there were a few older brothers present, so he was very cooperative with Song's words and put on an appearance of humbly seeking advice. Just say that the city lord has invited you. However, you are not allowed to reveal my identity. Azure said directly. All right, I got it. The burly man replied. Then he turned around and left without chatting with Uncle Long and the others. Does Senior Tsong intend to subdue the forces here? Uncle Long asked with a faint smile after the burly man left. I'm not subduing them, I'm meeting them. Azure said with a smile. The various forces here were originally attached to the City Lord's mansion. Now that the City Lord's mansion had changed hands, they had to be informed. Since the errand boy had come to the door, it would save them the trouble of the City Lord's guards passing on the message. Song understood the principle of making the best use of everything. Although the burly man looked a little silly, he was reliable. After informing the various forces, he returned to his own force to inform the boss. A few hours later, the representatives of the forces in the City of Desolation who had received the notice arrived one after another. Lu Fan was in charge of receiving them. With a reverent god personally coming forward, the representatives of the various forces were simply a little terrified. This reception standard was really too high. However, Lu Fan remained calm. Most importantly, after the new master had arrived, his hidden desire to see the world in chaos had suddenly emerged. Therefore, he really wanted to see the reactions of the representatives when they saw the new master. They had already predicted what might happen. So, how could he not be there to watch? However, his appearance made the representatives quite nervous. In the past, they were not so nervous when they saw the City Lord. However, when they saw Lu Fan, they felt very uneasy. Lu Fan was too low-key in the City Lord's mansion and ignored everything. It could be said that among the 4 reverent gods in the City Lord's mansion, they had seen Lu Fan the least. Now that they suddenly saw Sir Lu Fan smiling at them, they were really not used to it. Especially the burly man, he already knew that the City Lord had changed, and the previous City Lord had died. When he first found out about this, he didn't understand why a rabbit had become the City Lord. Now, he was even more confused. At that time, he had thought that all the hierarch in the City Lord's mansion had died. Now that he had seen the legendary Lu Fan, he felt a deep pain in his ass. Why is Sir Lu Fan still alive, but the City Lord is a rabbit? All this time, the rabbit had only been food in everyone's impression. Now, the food had become the City Lord, and they had to listen to the food in the future. No matter how they thought about it, this was unbelievable. In a while, when the major forces learned of this news, one could imagine how shocked they were. The burly man simply couldn't imagine that terrifying scene. The scene would be too beautiful, and he didn't dare to look at it directly. Just as the burly man had expected, when Song Yi appeared, all the representatives were stunned. However, Lu Fan hadn't introduced Song at that time, so the representatives thought that the City Lord's mansion was treating them to rabbit meat. Chapter 2932. Clue 3. Immediately, someone with a quick mouth laughed and teased, "Sir Lu Fan, does the City Lord want to treat us to rabbit meat? How do I eat it? Was it roasted or boiled? I personally prefer barbecued food." Lu Fan fell silent. He also knew that his master's image would cause people to misunderstand, but what he did not expect was that he was still sitting here, and someone dared to humiliate his master. Did they think he was dead? As for the burly man, he was so scared that his little heart was trembling. That rabbit wasn't meant to be eaten, it was the new City Lord. However, the 2 evil-minded people did not say anything about this. The burly man even silently moved his chair to the door to avoid being caught in the crossfire later. "You want to eat me?" At this time, Song jumped onto the table in front of the person who spoke, and his bright black eyes looked straight at him. "Aren't rabbits supposed to be eaten?" The man was stunned for a moment before he said matter-of-factly. Obviously, he didn't expect the rabbit in front of him to actually be able to speak. It should be known that rabbits were the lowest level of beasts, and not many could speak. "Yes, but in my eyes, you're also for eating," Song said as he grinned. "What did you just say?" When the person who spoke heard Song's words, he slammed the table in anger and stood up, glaring at Song. Song was neither angry nor annoyed. He floated in the air and looked at the other person. Then his small claws smacked the other person's bright big head. In an instant, 5 claw marks appeared on the person's head, and blood instantly flowed out. After being clawed, the man was dumbfounded. "Don't you know that trouble comes from the mouth? This is just a small punishment for you. If you dare to eat rabbits again, you'll let the rabbits eat you too," Song threatened. After that, it turned its gaze to the other people present and said with a faint smile, "I'm the new city lord of the city of desolation. Be good, or you'll regret it." Shocking. It was extremely shocking. Song's words petrified most of the people. Their eyes were wide open and their mouths were half open, unable to return to their senses for a long time. This is impossible. After a long time, someone shouted and turned to Lu Fan for confirmation. Lu Fan turned his head. His master had told him to speak less. Nothing is impossible. In the future, I'll be in charge here. You guys have to be obedient. Azure said unhappily. He was really bold. There was actually someone who dared to question its words. Humph. He could not be forgiven. Azure was furious. You want us to listen to a rabbit? Keep dreaming. The protesters continued to shout, clearly disagreeing with Song's words. If you don't listen, you will die. Azure said impolitely. When the person who spoke heard this, he actually laughed wildly. A rabbit told him to die if he didn't listen. This was really too interesting. But then he could no longer laugh. A white light flashed, and the man stopped breathing. The people present didn't even see what the white light was, and he was already dead. Who else wants to die? Report your name. Song's bright black eyes looked around at everyone present. When everyone was looked at by this gaze, especially when someone had died just now, they were all so scared that they didn't dare to make a sound. Did this rabbit kill someone in front of them? Everyone looked at Song, their hearts filled with shock. What's wrong? No one signed up? Seeing that no one said anything, Song asked again. My master is asking you a question. Why aren't you answering? Seeing that they were in a deadlock, Lu Fan interrupted. Master, what does that mean? Lu Fan's words made the representatives of the various forces even more horrified. They had never thought that Lu Fan would say such words. Was he trying to scare them to death? Master, are you referring to that rabbit? The crowd wasn't sure, but when they saw Lu Fan's serious expression, they didn't know what to do. What was going on? You exchanged a rabbit for City Lord Ji? To be honest, if Lu Fan became the City Lord, they could still accept it. But how could they accept a rabbit? As soon as they thought about how they would be led by a rabbit in the future, the people present felt a deep pain in their balls. However, this rabbit's strength seemed to be unfathomable, so for a moment, they didn't know how to deal with it. However, whether it was Tsang or Lu Fan, they had only gathered them to inform them and not to ask for their opinions. Therefore, it didn't matter whether they agreed or not. If they couldn't accept it, they could only die. Thanks, no one present dared to show any signs of disobedience to the message released by the man and beast. After learning that the former city lord was dead, they tactfully expressed their willingness to be loyal to him as before and left with their tails between their legs. After they left, the various factions started to secretly plot against the new city lord's estate. After all, they didn't want to work for a rabbit in the future. The representatives discussed for a long time and finally came up with a perfect plan. One night a week later, they quietly surrounded the city lord's mansion and planned to launch a sneak attack. The representatives had already bribed a few guards of the city lord's mansion, so when they arrived late at night, the gate of the city lord's mansion was opened for them. After sneaking into the city lord's mansion under the cover of the night, they were just about to split up when the courtyard suddenly turned bright as day. The dazzling light almost blinded their dog eyes. All the forces were shocked. What was going on? He had been discovered? Just as they were feeling uneasy, Lung Ruoxue and the rest walked out from a room. When she saw them, Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly and pretended to be confused. What's going on? Are you visiting me in the middle of the night? None of the major factions said a word. They only looked at Lung Ruoxue and her group with a vexed expression. What, are you all mute? Lung Ruoxue asked again, clearly provoking him. Fuck. You're the mute one. Your whole family is mute. It was unknown who it was, but someone shouted angrily. Lung Ruoxue squinted her beautiful eyes in displeasure. However, before she could make a move, a ray of white light flew towards the direction of the sound. Following that, a blood-curdling scream was heard as a person fell to the ground. Nyo kill. Bai Guang, also known as Tsang, said as he landed in Lung Ruoxiu's arms. Let the guards of the city lord's mansion take action. Well, just be the audience. Lung Ruoxiu said calmly. Yes, they are too weak. They should practice. Tsang nodded in agreement and gave Lu Fan a look. Lu Fan understood. In an instant, guards appeared out of nowhere and surrounded the various forces. In terms of numbers, the various forces clearly had the advantage. However, in terms of aura, they could not compare to the guards of the city lord's mansion who had been undergoing devilish training for the past few days. Moreover, the other party had an extremely powerful Reverend God-level expert, while the strongest person on the other side was a divine emperor. Such a difference in strength made them, who had planned to launch a surprise attack, feel deeply depressed. More importantly, the other party had disrupted all of their plans and caused them to be in a mess. Then, the two sides started to fight. The guards of the city lord's mansion, who had been tortured for several days, all went to find the people of the major forces like vicious wolves. They vented their grievances that had been suppressed for several days on these people who had come to die. As for the various forces who had not expected that the city lord's mansion's combat power and aura would increase by a large margin, they were now in a complete tragedy. Not long after, more than half of the people on the various forces' side had fallen, while the other half had also suffered injuries of varying degrees. The final result was a crushing defeat for the allied forces. After they became captives, Lung Ruoxiu and the others did not intend to kill them. Instead, they gave them a chance to make a contribution. This opportunity was naturally to find someone. Lung Ruoxiu needed them to provide clues. When the various factions heard that they would not have to die if they could provide information on the three phoenixes, they immediately expressed that they would work hard to complete the mission. At the same time, Lung Ruoxiu also ordered the city lord to post a reward notice. In an instant, the entire city of abandoned ruins was in action. Half a month later, in the living room of the city lord's mansion, Uncle Long looked at the calm Lung Ruoxiu and couldn't help but ask, "Shuer, it's been half a month and there's no clue at all. Could they have already left?" "I don't think so," Lung Ruoxiu guessed. "Then will our big actions reach the ears of the Ripple Mist bitch?" Uncle Long was a little worried. "It's possible. However, I'm not afraid to let her know," Lung Ruoxiu said confidently. She didn't think that Ripple would come all the way to the abandoned city just for 3 phoenixes. That woman was so confident that she didn't care about the 3 phoenixes at all. Hearing Shuer's words, what else could Uncle Long say? Suddenly, Lung Ruoxiu stood up and said to the demon, Uncle Long and the rest, "Green Vessel said that there's a lead." Hearing this, the few of them were overjoyed and quickly left the city lord's mansion with Shuer, heading towards the location of the clue. The more they walked, the more they felt that something was amiss. "Shuer, our house is just ahead." Uncle Long was speechless. "I know, but Qingju said that the aura of the Phoenix clan was leaked not far from where we used to live." Lung Ruoxiu replied honestly. All this time, she had asked Qingju to pay close attention to the situation in the city of Forsaken Ruins. Before this, Qingju's focus was on the city lord's mansion. After knowing that the previous city lord had not caught Feng Miao and the other two, she had asked Qingju to expand the scope of his attention. However, she did not know where Feng Miao and the other two were hiding. Qingju and Song had searched for them but could not find any clues. This time, if Qingju had not discovered a trace of the Phoenix clan's aura, they would not have found it. However, according to Qingju, the aura disappeared as quickly as it came, so he could not determine its exact location. However, there was no doubt that the 3 old phoenixes were still in the city of Forsaken Ruins. Just like that, Lung Ruoxiu and the rest walked in circles around the entrance of the house. Chapter 29:33. Don't look down on me, alright? 1. After searching for a long time, everyone found nothing. However, Lung Ruoxiu did not give up. Hence, after a discussion, they decided to stay here temporarily. After the news reached the city lord's mansion, Lu Fan immediately rushed over and looked at Lung Ruoxiu and the others with a bitter expression. However, his resentful expression was ignored by everyone present. Lu Fan was very worried. He could only leave resentfully, looking back 3 times with every step he took. After living in the suburbs, Leng Ruoxue and the rest seemed to have nothing to do every day. However, all of them were using their divine senses to check for suspicious people. At present, there were fewer people living in the suburbs than when they had first arrived. It was said that those who had less people had moved to the city, and they had only moved away in a hurry after the rumor of the man-eating flower had spread. After all, this place was too remote. If something really happened, he was afraid that he would not be able to find anyone to save him. When Leng Ruoxue found out that this was the reason for the sharp drop in the number of people here, she had mixed feelings. She couldn't understand. The suburbs were dangerous, but would it be safe to move to the city? Don't forget, the man-eating flower was in the city lord's mansion. In her opinion, moving to the city would be more convenient for the man-eating flower to eat. Later, after a burly man who tried to please them explained, she finally understood that the people who had moved to the city had joined various forces in order to seek shelter. Those people felt that they would be safe once they joined the city of abandoned ruins, but Leng Ruoxue could not help but complain. If Tsang had not destroyed the city lord and the blood cherry blossom tree had not fallen under their control, all the people in the city of abandoned ruins would have become the blood cherry blossom tree's backup food. Those forces would have been nothing more than granaries. However, there were benefits to those people leaving. Their departure had reduced the difficulty of their investigation. Currently, there were more than 30 households living here. After a few days of patient observation, Leng Ruoxue and the rest had already eliminated 32 households that were not suspicious. There were still 5 households that were the main targets of their observation and were under close surveillance. Very quickly, the information of these 5 families was placed in front of Leng Ruoxue and the rest. Among these 5 families, there was the man who had struck up a conversation with Uncle Long and the others. The members of the other families were also very simple. They did not have many family members. Hence, after discussing with Uncle Long and the others, Leng Ruoxue decided to get in touch with these families. After splitting up, Leng Ruoxue and the rest went their separate ways. She and the demon were in the same team, and their target was the family of 3. As neighbors, it was proper for them to visit each other. However, when the family of 3 saw Leng Ruoxue and the demon, they were obviously a little uneasy. In the city of abandoned ruins, neighbors rarely visited each other. Therefore, they were nervous when Leng Ruoxue and the demon came to visit. Leng Ruoxue only needed a single glance to know the strength of this family of 3. The male master was at the peak of the God King stage while the female master should have just advanced to the God King stage not long ago. As for their only son, he was currently only a god. After sitting down, Leng Ruoxue went straight to the point. We're here to ask about some things. What's the situation? The man asked cautiously. He knew that the man and woman had only been in the city of forsaken ruins for a short time, but the woman was very famous. He believed that if they really wanted to find out more, they could ask anyone in the city and someone would be willing to tell them. So, he could not understand why the woman would look for him. I heard that 3 phoenixes came to the city of abandoned ruins a while ago. Do you know where they are? Leng Ruoxue asked with a smile. Phoenix? Why would such a noble beast come to the city of abandoned ruins? The male owner had obviously never heard of this and asked with a suspicious look. You guys haven't heard of it? Leng Ruoxue continued to ask, feeling a little disappointed. Thanks, no, I haven't. There won't be any high-level beasts here, trust me. Seeing that Leng Ruoxue was only asking about this, the male owner's mood relaxed quite a bit. Hearing this, Leng Ruoxue was even more disappointed because she knew that this man was speaking the truth. When the other party answered the question, his eyes did not flash. Although there was doubt, he did not feel guilty. On the other hand, the mother and son were only at a loss. On top of that, when Leng Ruoxue was asking them questions, Qingju had also taken the opportunity to read the family's memories. He confirmed that they had never heard of the 3 phoenixes. With that, the family of 3 was cleared of all suspicion. After Leng Ruoxue and the demon left this house, they headed straight to the next one. Of course, the purpose of going to the next house was naturally to let Green Vessel read the other party's memory. They went to 3 families in a row. After Qing Ju confirmed it, these 3 families no longer had any suspicion of being in contact with Feng Miao, and their scope of investigation became smaller and smaller. There were still 2 families that had not been verified by Qing Ju. One of them was a pair of siblings, and the other was the man who had hit on Uncle Long. They first went to the house of the brother and sister. After knocking on the door, a woman opened the door angrily and asked, "Who? We have a friend at your house. We want to find him. Can we go in?" Leng Ruoxue asked with a smile. "You guys are together?" The woman asked unhappily. However, before Leng Ruoxue could reply, she left Leng Ruoxue and the others behind and turned to leave. Seeing this, Leng Ruoxue and the others exchanged glances before following her in. Although they did not understand why this woman's attitude was so bad, it was only when they were face to face that it would be convenient for Green Vessel to read each other's memories. Therefore, even if they were treated coldly, they had to thicken their skin and follow. Walking into the living room, the atmosphere was not very good. Minga sat on the chair with a dark face, and the other man was also glaring at her with a red face. No one knew what had happened between them. As soon as she saw Leng Ruoxue and the others, Mingji pounced over as if she had seen her savior. She hugged the demon's arm and cried, "Ooh, boss, help. What's wrong?" The demon frowned and unceremoniously pulled his arm away. He even patted his sleeve in disgust, as if it was stained with something dirty. Seeing this, Ming's heart was filled with sorrow. He felt that he had been hurt. Fortunately, the demon did not know what he was thinking. Otherwise, he would have wanted to hurt him even more. "Did someone bully you?" Leng Ruoxue. "There are." Mingji nodded her head vigorously and looked at Leng Ruoxue with a gratified expression. "Damn it, who bullied you? You took advantage of my sister, don't you want to take responsibility?" When he heard that Minga was being bullied, the other man in the hall immediately shouted in dissatisfaction. His words caused Leng Ruoxue and the others to widen their eyes in surprise. They looked at the woman who was standing beside the man with a shy expression on her face. They really wanted to ask, "Who was this?" The woman's face was red, and her eyes were watery. She looked like a completely different person from when she was angry just now. However, Leng Ruoxue and the others still couldn't imagine how Mingji could take advantage of her. Chapter 2934. Don't look down on me, all right? 2. It should be known that the woman was tall and strong, and there was no feminine charm on her body. As the city lord of the 9 Nether prison, what kind of woman had Mingji not seen? So, they couldn't imagine how Mingji could possibly take advantage of that woman. Could it be that he had seen too many beautiful women and wanted to change his taste? But wasn't this change of taste a little too much? The crowd couldn't accept it for a moment, and they all turned to look at Ming Song with strange expressions. Minga didn't even need to guess to know what these bad guys were thinking, so he quickly explained, "I didn't take advantage of her. I just accidentally touched her hand, and the siblings forced me to take responsibility." As he said this, Minga was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. And these people even doubted his innocence. Boo, what a sad bird. He had to take responsibility just because they touched this matter. Leng Ruoxue and the rest were especially speechless when they heard this. Was your sister's hand very precious? Why do I have to take responsibility for accidentally touching it? What's wrong with making you take responsibility? I'm looking up to you by asking you to take responsibility. The man shouted at Minga. Please don't look down on me, okay? Mingji was depressed to death. But this man thought that the reason he could marry his sister was because of his cultivation in his previous life. What the hell is this? No. You have to give us an explanation for this. The man shouted loudly. What kind of explanation do you want? How do you want him to take responsibility? Leng Ruoxue pointed at Mingji as she asked the man. This pair of siblings looked very similar. The elder brother was also a strong guy, but his temper was not very good. Meanwhile, Leng Ruoxue had also learned some things from Qing Ju. At the same time, she eliminated the possibility that he knew the whereabouts of the 3 phoenixes. However, Mingji's matter was a little troublesome. It was obvious that the woman wanted to cling to Mingji, even if Mingji had not done anything at all. The so-called touch was just a deliberate touch when the woman handed Mingji the tea. His purpose, of course, was to make Mingji take responsibility. The reason was simple. The little sister, who had been ignored all this time, had taken a fancy to Mingji. As an elder brother, he naturally had to cooperate fully. The brother and sister were used to being barbaric and could be considered as tyrants in the outskirts of the city of abandoned ruins. Therefore, if they wanted to settle this matter, they had to be tougher. Otherwise, they were afraid that there would be no end to the argument. Lung Ruoxue didn't want to waste her time on unimportant people or things. It's impossible for Mingji to marry your sister. Lung Ruoxue said. Why not? Which part of my sister isn't good enough for him? When the man heard this, his anger grew even more. It's not a matter of whether he's worthy or not. Minga doesn't like him at all. Do you want the tyrant to force himself on him? What good would that do to your sister? Lung Ruoxue said helplessly. She could tell that this was a rather stubborn man. He was also a persistent man who had always wanted to marry his sister off. I don't care. He took advantage of my sister, so he has to take responsibility. The man said unreasonably. You have to take responsibility after touching me. What kind of logic is this? Lung Ruoxue was truly speechless. Just how afraid was he that her younger sister would not be able to get married? Don't you know that men and women shouldn't touch each other? The man reminded. All right, but as far as I know, it was your sister who touched Mingji. What about that? Lung Ruoxue. From what you know. You weren't there at the time, so how could you know? When the man heard Lung Ruoxue's words, he snorted. Thanks, you mean Mingji has no witnesses? Lung Ruoxue blinked her eyes and asked again. Not bad. The man nodded proudly. What if I say that I can read minds? I know everything about you and your sister, including what you're thinking now. Lung Ruoxue said calmly. This is impossible. The man didn't believe it at all. What you're thinking now is that no matter what, you must get your sister married. You can't let go of Mingji, this rich son-in-law. If we don't agree, then you're planning to make this matter known to everyone so that the public can condemn us, right? Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly. You? The man was shocked by Lung Ruoxue's words. He pointed at Lung Ruoxue, unable to complete his sentence. Your sister is thinking that we can't let go of this opportunity. We must hold on to Mingji. Lung Ruoxue glanced at the man who was at a loss for words, then looked at his sister. Hearing this, the younger sister's expression changed slightly. She then looked at Lung Ruoxue unhappily and roared, What are you talking about? He should be the one taking responsibility. All right, I don't have time to waste on you siblings. I only have one thing to say. Don't covet people you can't afford to offend. You must know your own limits. Lung Ruoxue sneered. She really had no more patience. Originally, she had wanted to talk things out and make the siblings give up on this idea, but now that she saw that her younger sister was still so stubborn, she deeply felt that she had to cut the Gordian knot and end the battle as soon as possible. After she finished speaking, Lung Ruoxue gave the evil demon and the rest a look. They understood and walked out. The moment the woman saw this, she immediately stood in front of Lung Ruoxue and the rest and shouted at the top of her voice, Don't leave! Move! He shouted. Lung Ruoxue said unhappily, I won tea. Unless he's willing to marry me. The woman insisted. I won't marry you. Minga said directly without even looking at the woman. You? The woman was greatly shocked. Mingji had never said such harsh words to her before. At that time, she had thought that Mingji was interested in her, but who knew? The woman felt her heart break. Was it easy for her to fall for someone? Why did he do this to her? What about me? Get out of my way, don't block our way. In fact, although he wasn't very gentle to women, he rarely said such words directly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried to reason with her. But now, he was really forced to lose his patience. This woman not only couldn't read other people's expressions, She was also extremely thick-skinned. You want us to take action? After Mingji finished speaking, Lung Ruoxue turned to look at the man and said. The man revealed a constipated expression and was a little undecided. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxue smiled indifferently. If you provoke us, that good brother of yours won't be able to help you. You might even bring trouble to him. You guys can leave. The man helplessly said as he heavily exhaled. He knew who Lung Ruoxue was talking about and the strength of Lung Ruoxue and the others. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used this opportunity to cling on to them. But it was obvious that these people were not people that the two of them could afford to offend. He could only blame himself for being blinded by greed and almost getting himself killed. Thinking of this, the man broke out in a cold sweat. Brother, you can't let them go. The woman hurriedly said. Shut up. The man roared angrily, and the woman immediately didn't dare to make a sound. If even her brother didn't want to help her, she wouldn't dare to pester him anymore. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.